reason why we need these movement patterns is because once you load it, because in sport, you're going to move through most of them.
So hello and welcome back to PA Chalk Up. Today we've probably got one of the springiest people I've ever met in my life. Hello, Nate. How you doing?
How's it going, Manny?
I'm good.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. Obviously, I know you from the University of Washington, and we met during the internship. But for the people listening, tell them a little bit about yourself.
First, I love the term springing. Love the term spring. We didn't even get to talk about that yet, but that's I love that.
Like honestly, when we did the jump tests, like you were airborne for a while.
Hey man, I gotta represent. You know, I can't let these kids catch up. But yeah, a little about me. I'm Nathan Allas. I go by Nate. I'm a strength and conditioning coach out of Maximum Sports Conditioning. It's a premier strength and conditioning facility out of Bellevue, Washington. If you don't know where Bellevue, Washington is, it's Seattle. Go 15 minutes east and you're there. And then I'm there 6 days a week. You're not gonna miss me. We train pro, college, high school, youth athletes, and everyone in between as well, and everyone outside of that. And as many said, we met through the UW internship under Coach Mack, Ron Kiefery. And ever since then, you know, we got some food, talked about programming, talked about S&C, and look at us now. We're here. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. In terms of athletic career, I was a mixed martial artist for a while. I started off doing Taekwondo when I was younger and doing that as well. I started doing boxing, some wrestling, some BJJ, and then all of a sudden, you know, bing, bang, boom, I was an MMA fighter. Didn't go pro, just amateur. And currently I still train, but I don't do that stuff anymore. It takes a lot of guts and glory for someone to keep doing it. So I'm kind of out of that. So
no, so if you want to talk about like your fights and fighting processes and how you went through camp and all that stuff.
Yeah, man. So yeah, I was a reminder, I'm not at the pro level, so I didn't have, you know, nutritionists on my side. Man, I did the old school, high school water cut type of thing. So, you know, what are you doing? You're not drinking water. You're just checking your weight every time you know, if you're not at that weight, you throw on a sauna suit. This is before my degree, so don't get on me.
Don't come at me.
No, this is before my degree. So the whole entire fight process is that I guess psychologically that's the hardest thing. Physically, you know, I also played basketball, but not as talented. I was pretty springy, as Manny said, but not as, you know, I don't have those physical qualities.
Vertically challenged.
Vertically challenged. I had to make up with my vertical jump. I think we tested on the force plates and jump at like a 38 at the time. It was a 38.
I think it was.
Yeah.
At the time, so it's went up.
No. It's gone down. It's gone down, man. But what a fight process was like, you know, typically we didn't know too much about the opponent. We didn't have too much recording or anything of that sort. So it's honestly the type of fighter that I was is I wouldn't really go in with a specific game plan. I was really on my feet. I was really quick thinking. Luckily, I had coaches at the time that had great experience, and they could say, okay, you know, if you're fighting an orthodox fighter or southpaw, you know, luckily for me though, I was adept on both. You know, you know, back then when I did Taekwondo originally, they really teach you how to be southpaw and orthodox, and it's a very bladed stance. While in boxing, you know, when I transitioned over a little bit to learn more, you know, hand techniques for MMA, they're like, man, stop switching stances. You gotta learn how to fight orthodox. And I'm like, but I'm winning the fights, coach. so and they're like, fine, come on, just keep winning. So that's the whole thing about it. But when I was doing MMA, you know, I was, you know, newly graduate of high school, and you know, I did some before high school as well, right? But it is mentally taxing on someone that young. especially if you care like so much about it. Because from basketball, a mentality that I took from basketball was Kobe Bryant. If you ever seen them used by Kobe Bryant, that he's literally insane. Rest in power. But that's the same mentality I took to MMA. And then you take into consideration that there's already your Mike Tysons from boxing, your John Jones, your Conor McGregor's, that this is what they eat, breathe, and sleep. You, as a competitor, if you truly believe in yourself, that is the ceiling that you're trying to break through. And I was in a journeyman. I'm in this until the wheels fall off, and the wheels have fallen off now. So, but what it was is just school education that came secondary. As much as a student athlete, I want to preach to the kids that mentally it was everything comes second. My relationships come second. Work comes second. Even family at a certain point in time came second. And there's some things I don't love about that, especially now. That's why I'm here now. But it was 24/7, 7 days a week. You're not going to catch me not thinking about or portraying myself as an MMA fighter. If I was in class, I'd be doing some footwork underneath, right? I was doing some little drills with my feet underneath. Maybe that's the ADHD in me. Maybe I just couldn't focus. But fight camps, they were physically, it's all the same. You're throwing 100% in. Truth is, the sport coaches don't know the physiological effect that you're trying to attain from running burners or doing 100 push-ups. They're like, weightlifting makes it slow. Funny fact.
But does it?
I'll talk about that later. But it's all the same in terms of the fights. Some fights were a little bit more grueling than others, not because of the opponent, but because of what was happening in life. I feel like a lot of MMA fighters, they bring life into MMA. Luckily, though, for many, they don't bring MMA into life, and that's something you don't really want to. It's you gotta two-face it. You definitely should two-face it. If you kind of have this portrayal all the time, it's not going to be good for. It's not going to be good for anyone.
Yeah, you've kind of touched upon it a little bit, but a lot of people don't know how much education and how much sort of schoolwork actually goes in to being an S&C coach or a sports scientist or a PT or anything like that. Can you dive into your background a little bit?
Yeah, my background was originally when my first semester of undergraduate. I was a business major. I wanted to commit to business. I don't even know if you knew this. Yeah, I want to do business. And I was doing internships, and I was doing I was doing classes, and I was like, man, I hate talking to people like this. So I was like, and I don't love the math. I don't love the statistics behind it. I dread it almost. And I was like, the form of bodily movement was always an interest of me, right? MMA, that's constant. Obviously, I worked out at the time, your basic programs, nothing crazy. I think at the time I was doing, to increase my vertical jump in high school for basketball, I was doing Jump Attack by Tim Grover. He's the trainer of Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant and Dwayne Wade. He's trained them a couple times. There's some things in the program that I look back, I'm like, man, that's funny. But besides that, there's a lot of education behind it. But as I said, first semester I was business. Then I started to move more into let's take a sports med class. All right, let's take a nutrition class. All right, I love this. So what's my career path from here? All right, I got about 3 more years. How could I optimize this for my future self? All right, so I looked into physical therapy. I worked in a physical therapy clinic for almost 2 years. I did love it. I didn't love the insurance behind it. I didn't love sitting at the time. I love the philosophy behind it. I don't always love, sometimes it's slow. Physical therapy is not a pretty process all the time. It's grueling. Your patients got to come in. Typically the easy ones come in twice a week. sometimes they're in 6 days a week, especially post-op, right? So it's difficult. Yeah. It's a difficult process. And if you gotta make sure you're on your toes, because if you mess up, or if you're like, oh, the protocols are this, but the protocols are that, yeah, sure, the protocols are good. That's research, but how about the data or the abstract? Let's say for research, people are like, oh yeah, the research says this, research says that. You read the abstract, man. What'd you read about the data? How about the outliers? Because the guy I have on the table right now, he's that outlier, right? And I'm not just talking about physical therapy in regards to this as well. I'm talking about everything, right? It's athletic training, S&C, even environmental science. That there are studies out there and research that has to be
taken. It is that, and sometimes going through the results that is. It is that sometimes there's that 2-3 people that didn't work well with the program. So what are you going to do about it?
Exactly. And then typically they try to bias certain populations, or they're like untrained college men. I'm like, all right, cool. What do we do when we have a super athlete on the table? What if we got a Holtz or a Subeng Tang on the table? What happens now? Right? So all that stuff is kind of in the air regarding that. But like I said, I worked in a physical therapy clinic. I also did some internships for athletic training as well. That was another route that I considered too. So my background in terms of S&C really came from more of a rehab side of things, more of an understanding of functional anatomy and physiology, rather than just like, okay, what adaptation am I trying to get from A, B, and C? So I originally didn't look at it through the lens of that. So then came maximum sports conditioning. Laura Sue, she dropped into one of her classes, I believe, and then she just was like, hey, telling about what she does. Oh, she's an amazing strength and conditioning coach, by the way. She has her own business. I believe it's called Liberate Strength. So if you want to get strong, go to her. She's great. But she dropped in and she told us what maximum sports conditioning was about, and I was like, man, I get to get people jump higher and run faster. Man, I love this. So I was like, all right. So I contacted her. Then I got to meet Sachin McDonald, co-owner of Maximum Sports Conditioning, and we also got to meet Daniel John, DJ, and he actually got into the industry because of Bill Gillespie. I don't know if you're familiar with that name. Yeah, he was a former S&C coach at UW. Way back in the day, right? DJ, he used to be a baseball player at UW. And that's his story to tell. It's not mine. So, but that's kind of the gist. That's the
just
gist
for
of it. So
people who want to see the gym that you're at just now. Let's
skip my face.
We can watch this video.
No. Yeah, we got I'll highlight the kids later. But yeah. I mean, we talked about it before the podcast, but then started interning there while I was working in physical therapy and athletic training. And then I was like, man, like I'm starting. I was dreading, and remind you, I wasn't getting paid. It's an internship. Most S&C coach or S&C internships, you're there because you want to learn. You have a desire to learn, and you have a desire to set yourself apart from other interns or other people of your age range, right? So I wasn't getting paid. I was there 2 days a week originally. Then I went to 3 days a week, 4 or 5, then 6. And then I was still working at my PT jobs and my AT spots. And I was like, man, I'm dreading this. Like, I don't love, when I go to my clinic, I'm dreading this. I need 5 cups of coffee to even get to my car, man. Like, and then I'm like, oh man. So then that's really when I made the transition over to S&C. And then, man, I've learned so much from Sachin and DJ, Laura, and all the other strength coaches over there too. And it really helped me put my foot through the door and helped me transition easily into the wing of Ron McKeefery, and that helped a lot. And that kind of elevated that as well, because like I said, I'm really scientific based. What is the physiological effect behind, what you're doing. Why are you doing EMOMs? Why are you doing a clean instead of a dumbbell jump? Why are you doing the catch? Is it for intent? Why do the catch? Why are you doing a high pull? Yada, 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 right? So I really got the scientific base from, maximum sports conditioning. And then when I went into UW, that's when we're really, we're going 100 miles per hour. And, I think you even know, like we talked about this, the questions I asked were just science. And it's absurdly just science. And I'm just like, I could almost hear you guys like putting earplugs in your guys' ears.
No, but like I said at the start, I think like it's important that everyone had their thing, because like a big thing of Coach Mac is like he has people that have like their specialities, but at the same time they're all rounded. Like I think that was the same for the interns. Like you were science, I was more like making sure that everyone was cool, and like psychology and dumbing everything down so everyone could understand what we were trying to say. And like Chu was obviously, he's just like Chu's Chu, like he just connected with everyone. He was like making everyone laugh, just like keeping spirits high. Like every intern had their thing, and I think discrediting this, although like sometimes I even got lost and I was like, yeah. But that's Nate. Like Nate asked the scientific questions. Like sometimes that's important too, because we need to know the background and why that happens. What are physiological adaptations are we looking for? Like, are we doing these sprints for max velocity, speed, or just reps?
Yeah. I mean, I think even when we were doing the presentations, right? I talked about the foot stuff, and I think
that's something that I wanted to speak to you about, though, because like although like some parts you lost me at, but like it was still like very interesting to know how much movement the foot has, and like why it's so important to have that movement.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I definitely caught some people drooling, when I was doing that, and people were like, "What does this mean?" so that's I've definitely it's definitely something I kind of dive into. That's kind of I like the science behind it. I'm a results guy, so yeah. But anyways, what we were talking about how I got into SNC. So yeah, we were doing the internship together, and then after the internship, obviously, I got things going on, and I transitioned fully to maximum sports conditioning, where I'm now a full-time SNC coach. And I'm not a director of any sorts. I'm not the head guy. That's Sachin and DJ right there. But luckily, they give a lot of responsibility to us and the other coaches, where we can, create changes in the program, under, their supervision. And then, we're on, they got to do some stuff behind the scenes to make sure stuff is flowing right. So that means we're the fellas out on the floor. They're going to see us mostly. They're going to hear what we have to say. They're going to hear the cues that we tell them. And, where if there's any adjustments that needs to be made, any lateralizations, degressions, progressions from a certain exercise or rep scheme, that's why we're there. And we have full control of that. And I'm glad about that. And then luckily with my PT background as well, and then not just, being in clinic as well, doing my further research into that, and just, honestly trying things practically in settings. I'm able to kind of mitigate certain things. Let's say someone has a lower back pain. I have a program for that. If someone has some hip pain like bursitis or impingement, I got something for that. Knee pain, dude, let's check that out. Ankle pain, dude, yada, yada, yada. So that's some things that, that I have some control in, superficially.
Yeah.
And dude, we're 20 minutes in. We could go for 4 hours if we really want to talk about this. So
it's cool. We've got all the time. Something that
you're gonna have to remind me. You're gonna have to remind me that about some things. So yeah.
Something that you kind of touched on, and I think it's really important to get across, is that you kind of want to pick internships or people you work with that are leaders and not bosses. There's a very fine difference between having a boss and having a leader. Like a leader is still a boss, like they're still above you, but instead of like, this is what you're doing, this is the program, stick to it. So you're essentially just a robot at that time. You're just paying out their information. Whereas like in your
I've been in
case,
situations that are like that.
yeah, it's the same. And like the good thing about like the sort of interns I've been into, and now you as well, is like we're allowed to have that input. We're allowed to sort of make the changes on the fly to adapt to the programs. On the back of that, you touched on sort of having bank programs, which I think is really important as well. So you're not having to start from scratch all the time. Can you sort of dive into sort of like the bank programs that you have?
Yeah. So regarding some injuries and things like that, luckily we have physical therapists not on our staff, but we share the same facility. They're G4 athlete, I believe. But we work with them closely. So anytime there's anything out of our scope of practice, that's a referral, right? And they refer plenty of people to us as well. So it's a great relationship that we have. I love all the PTs on that staff, and I'm glad I still kind of get to work within that realm a little bit, because I did love, like I said, PT. That was my original first introduction behind it, and then but typically anytime, like let's say for the back pain, right? They're like, hey, coach, I just got done playing a 2-day tournament, played 6 games, played every minute of it. Man, let me tell you this. I went to the batting cages this last weekend, and I hit 50 balls. Well, I attempted to hit 50 balls, right? My back is still sore. So I totally, I'm not going to just be like toughen up. You're not mentally tough enough. Like, dude, shut your pie hole if you're about that, oh man, and I got a whole another story to tell about that. But typically, so especially with our rotational athletes, right? You got your softball, baseball, even MMA as well if you're really kick dominant, and then even lacrosse, right? They get some back pain because it's so much rotation, right? So much torque. You ever see sometimes you forget
torque as well.
Sometimes I forget how athletic some of these, because we see them in the gym. They're freak athletes right there and then. But when you see them play, you're like, holy man, I forget sometimes, right? So typically, if we get lower back pain, and I've had girls that have never lifted weights that have pars fractures. They see me for a first time or second time, and they're volleyball players, and they're like, yeah, I have pars fracture. And then obviously they're gonna be like, oh, I got knee pain or I got lower back pain, yada yada. Man, it's just insane. So typically what I do, not in the case of a pars fracture, but in someone that has lower back pain, I'm specialized or certified in RPR. It's reflexive performance reset. So typically I take them through a couple of tests regarding that. And it's not so much like myofascial release, that is typically done. And I still do that as well. It's more of, your body creates compensation patterns through what you do on a daily basis. So if I'm sitting at my desk 7 hours a day, right, 6 days a week, boom, right here, 24/7. My body's going to adapt to that. My psoas is going to shorten, my lower back, my QLs, they're going to lengthen. And then guess what that means? Now my glutes are going to be, not, I don't want to throw the term activated, but for
misfiring.
Yeah, exactly. And then your hamstrings are going to lengthen and your quads are going to shorten. So obviously some of these people are still in school, so that's an issue that we run into. But your body creates these compensation patterns if you're an athlete. So your body's going to find the easiest path of resistance. And then if that means if I'm going through hip extension, I'm firing with my lower back first, that's going to be a problem. Your lower back, your contralateral QL isn't supposed to be a primary mover. It's supposed to be a stabilizer, right? So it's supposed to be your glute hamstring, QL, right? If I'm firing with that, dang, yeah, I'm probably gonna have some back pain, over time. It might not just be right there and then, but I'm gonna have some back pain, right? So what we do, we test them out. We do some RPR drills, and I'm not I can't really teach RPR. It's out of my scope of practice, but it's something that I could do and teach my fellows to do for themselves when I'm not there, right? So I do that. If that helps out, we're done. And then typically too, they're like, oh, I can squat with no knee pain, no back pain. Great, right? But then I notice typically that's usually RPR helps a lot with muscular problems, so neurological and muscular problems. But I noticed with connective tissue injuries, it's a little different, right? So connective tissue is less avascular, and I'm not even talking about just tendons. I'm talking about fascia as well, right? And fascia is just omnidirectional. It's It's everywhere in your body, and that's a whole nother conversation that I could delve into later. But for connective tissues, so typically, I check out, okay, what limitations do you have? I see them squat every day. So usually I'm like, okay, your ankle, because I'm telling you're when we do our back downs, and we don't 1 rep mats or squats, we do our back downs, and I'll get a little bit into that because we run a conjugate program. I'm not gonna say I'm a conjugate coach, but we that's the philosophy we follow primarily regarding programming. So yeah, I know what their ankles look like. I know what their dorsiflexion looks like. Usually they're fine, right? Unless like they had some traumatic injury and now their body's guarding that up neurologically. Then I look at their hips because the knee is supposed to be a stability joint, right? You don't want no mobility through the knee. So I check out the hips. Is there a limitation in internal, external rotation? Is there a positive, impingement? Is there possible impingement going on? What can I do about it? Typically if there's an impingement, we will do some myofascial release, release some internal and external rotators. And then, if you're limited internally and externally, it's going to be what's reciprocated of that I'm going to release. So, but regarding particularly internal rotation and impingements, I'll put a band on their hip and do a distraction, right? And typically I do it with them because I've had them just set it up on a squat rack and then they do it. They're like, what am I looking for, coach? What am I trying to feel? I don't really feel anything. Then I'm like, all right, put your foot on this bench, have my hand on their back. I'm pulling that band. They're like, oh, what is going on? They're like, that's what I want you to feel. So once we open up that joint, right, we're going to throw in a couple mobility drills. So let's say for internal rotation, I'll do some 90-90s, some hip airplanes. Nothing crazy. You don't want to, irritate the joint
go wild too quickly. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's your body was guarding it, and now it's unguarded, and now you're just throwing a bunch of stuff at it. So you got to take your time with it. So just a couple mobility, and then I'll neurologically prime it again. So let's say for external rotators, if you're limited in that, I'll throw a band around their knees. I'll have them do a couple bodyweight squats. 5 reps, nice and easy. It doesn't have to be 20. It doesn't have to be 10. Minimum effective dose. Why burn the steak? Right. So going down nice and slow, make sure you're feeling what you're doing and go back up. And I almost tell my kids too, I'm like, tell me what you're feeling. I want you to tell me what you're feeling. So then they're really focusing on that external rotation with the band. Now, vice versa, if it's internal rotation, typically what I do is a reverse clam. So I'll have them lay on their side, have a foam roller between their knees, and have them internally rotate pretty much. And honestly, probably, like I said, minimum effective dose. I'm not trying to burn the steak. So after that, retest them. They should be fine after that regarding any knee pain. And I know we were talking about back protocol. Gosh, let's see, dude, you gotta reel me back.
No, I think this is good though, because a lot of people don't know that they have these weaknesses. So I think going over and okay, if you're not feeling it directly in your quads when you're squatting or single leg squatting, something's going on there, and we need to fix that. So I think diving into that sort of, you touched on as well, that connection. I know it's a very popularized saying now, but that mind to body, that mind to muscle connection is really important, because then you know exactly how you're activating it, when you're activating it. I do this a lot for my programs. Is I'll teach eccentrically first. So eccentrically, you're getting that feel for, okay, now it's lengthening. Now I'm feeling it. Cool. Bring it back down. Let's feel that again. So I think having that connection between your mind and the muscle is a really good thing to reactivate the muscles as well.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And thanks for backing me up on my tangent.
But no, I wouldn't let you go on a tangent unless I thought it was important. So something that you mentioned before is the torque and rotational torque as well. And someone that I met while I was out there, Curtis Clay, he does a lot of rotational stuff. And he's been diving into quite a lot, especially in these types of videos.
Yeah.
Not so much tying your hair back, but the rotational stuff that he gets his athletes to do.
For sure. Yeah.
and it's just cueing that properly. I think that's
Exactly.
quite important for people to do early on, because then if you
Oh,
teach that movement
absolutely.
pattern early on, then it's correct. You're
Yeah.
getting that smooth, and you can stay in your sport longer as well.
Yep, absolutely. And then going off of that as well, a lot of, if you get sport coaches, especially if you get a kid that just throws fire, right?
Mm,
They usually won't, adjust your mechanics just because, like, hey, if it's not broke, don't fix it.
don't fix
And
it.
then because now it's a faulty movement pattern, it's like running a car on high miles. Eventually, things are going to start to rattle. That rattle is going to turn into shake. All of a sudden, you're going to get an injury. So, obviously I'm not a biomechanist. I am not a, throwing coach, but I think my job as a S&C coach, a lot of S&C coaches, they try to be sport coaches. You gotta train general in the weight room and specific on in your sport.
On the
And
field.
sorry, exactly. We have the greatest amount of technology now, right? So we have the best orthopedic surgeons now, the best physical therapists, athletic trainers, the best researchers out there, but sport injuries are still going on, right? So why is this? Because compensation patterns within your sport. And then guess what we're also seeing now too, because you got the rise of social media, you got little kids doing, dunks in 7th and 6th grade, right? So what are people going to do? They're going to specialize early. Early specialization is underdevelopment. All right. And the more underdeveloped you are, that's going to take you back because eventually, if you're about that, you're going to be like, okay, I got to get on an S&C program. I got to get stronger, and people, they're going to be like, wait, another tangent, they're going to say like, oh, my kid, they don't need strength. They don't need strength to hit the ball, right? They need to become faster from home to first, right? So I just need them to do sprint work all day, speed, 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 speed. Well, guess what? So you're looking for power, right?
Mm.
Yes. I'm talking in two people right now. Oh my gosh, I'm insane. But
There's three
it's
people on
about
this podcast, ladies and gentlemen.
dude, we got a third person. So you're looking for power, right? Yes, absolutely. He needs more power, right? Well, what's power? Force times
Mm.
velocity. Well, what's force? Mass times acceleration. Mass moves mass. He has to get stronger. And guess what? If strength didn't matter, steroids wouldn't be illegal. And guess what? Especially me as an MMA fighter, would I ever want to fight someone on steroids? No. I am getting the immediate consequences of him doping
Mm.
because, he took some steroids and now, ow, I'm in pain. So, anyways,
Mark Hunt's actually the perfect example of that.
what was
He
that?
fought Mark Hunt when he
Oh,
fought, yeah, um, he fought someone that was on steroids, and the outcome was not pretty.
exactly. Oh my dude, especially old school UFC and Pride, man. Everyone
Mm.
juiced, man. Exactly. Gosh.
Everyone was beefy.
Dude, Alistair Overeem, dude, horse meat, dude, what a horse meat you eating?
the, I want some of that.
Exactly, man.
Um, my lecturer, my physiology lecturer, he's very much anti any type of supplements, and his philosophy comes down to if it made that big of a difference, it would be banned, like a banned substance. It's like
Exactly.
protein's not banned. It does what it says on the tin. It helps repair muscle, but not to a high enough level that it's a banned substance.
Right. Yeah.
Creatine's the same. Enough physiological changes happen, but not enough to be significant in a way of actually hurting people in the process.
Yeah. Absolutely. And then going back to the point of injuries, right? We were talking about torque and all that, and then we were talking about being specific, right? Um,
Yes, yes, yes.
yeah.
No, I
Exactly.
think that's really important as well because like I grew up multi-sport and like my balance is good because of that. I started skimboarding, surfing, and then I go into football, rugby, swimming, like just any sport that involved big muscles. And then that made sure that now whenever I pick up a sport, I've already got that baseline of okay, I'm somewhat athletic. Let me just adapt to wherever I'm playing.
Well, yeah. Better movers become better athletes, right? And then I don't know if you're familiar with the name Rolf Ullmann, but he's the president of the track and field team in China, right? So him and Randy Huntington are the great buddies. I got to talk to Rolf a couple of months ago, but man, he is one of those people, and this is going to lead into movement patterns. He's one of those people that was genuinely in awe of. Holy, you're just in an encyclopedia of S&C expertise. Like I was following. It's just I was. It was all ears, man. It was all ears. I couldn't really say anything because I was, I'm absorbing this information in awe, right? Because in China too, a common thing that you see is Olympic lifts, right? Olympic lifts for all athletes, right? So they're doing early specialization, and then Olympic lifts, they're not necessary, but I'll talk about that in a bit. It's another tool in toolbox, right, to get your athletes to whatever adaptation you decide is deemed necessary. But there's 9 movement patterns that I look for, that our coaches look for, and then that Rolf Ullmann looks for, and then this is kind of stemming from him. So we kind of give his grace on that end of the spectrum. But the reason why we need these movement patterns is because once you load it, because in sport you're gonna move through most of them, right? Unless you're track, or very specialized, you may just miss some of these. But at the end of the day, you gotta become a better mover.
Yeah,
right?
Can you go through those 9?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's gonna be squat, push, pull, lunge, brace, hinge, rotate, jump, and landing. Yeah, exactly. But a failure to learn these movements, it's gonna be, you're once you if you prematurely load them, guess what? It's not gonna be a pretty thing. It's not gonna be a pretty thing at all. So, and then I think one of the things that as S&C coaches, on paper, our profession is improve performance. Whether if that's for tactical side of things or if you're working with pro college athletes or high school or youth athletes, it's improved performance. I think most people that come to us would probably agree with that, right? So that's the superficial level of it. But in the small subscripts, there should be do no harm. Do no harm. So what does that mean? Does that mean there's many ways to do harm to an athlete? As I said, prematurely loading an athlete that's not ready for these movement patterns. That's an example one. Because yes, my intention is not being okay, the weight room's kind of busy. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna walk away. Of course, that's negligence. That's a type of harm, right? But harm isn't just limited to negligence. Harm isn't just limited to, okay, I'm gonna have them do dumbbell jumps over here in the weight room where people are squatting. That's not just doing harm, right? Doing harm is, it could fall. It's a whole entire umbrella term that we could have a whole entire 5-hour discussion about, right? So are you preemptively loading them? Are you what physiological effect on them are you doing on them? Because at the end of the day, of course, you want to optimize performance for this specific athlete. At their, if they have any contraindications, you follow as needed, right? So what's it called? If I say, this athlete, athlete A, if I'm throwing an exercise at them that is not optimizing that or kind of gets, overlaps that contraindication, even though in my mind I'm like, oh, I'm doing my best to make sure they're safe. That's still you're still causing harm, right? If you're having your sports team, your volleyball team, do conditioning for an hour after your strength and conditioning session, where your girls were just jumping 30, you're doing harm. You're like I said, you're gonna burn that steak. You're starting to oxidize those type 2 fats and everything of that sort, whether if it's the day of or day after. You got to have your high and low days. I mean, that's the Charlie Francis things. And then that's why we go back to conjugate, typically, and we're not a high school, and we don't, as much as we try our best to, we don't always get to stay in touch with the sport coaches, right? Because sport coaches are sport coaches. At the end of the day, the athletes will do their sport number one. And we totally get that. The reason why you're with us is to make sure you get better at your sport physically, right? So totally get it. And then we have great relationships with our sport coaches that we talk to. But sometimes, they'll there's just or new relationships that we have. There's something they're gonna be like, oh yeah, we just had our guys run 2 miles before practice. I'm like, dude, are y'all what sport are y'all doing? Oh,
Yeah.
we're doing football, right? I'm like, so you're training like a cross country person, sport of slow. You want slow guys? Keep running those miles, man. Because watch this, you have them come in, their dumbbell jumps are gonna be lower, they're gonna be slower, and you're gonna be wondering, man, they need more conditioning. They just seem too tired at the end of the game. Well, that's not conditioning, that's work capacity. And that is where conjugate comes into the whole mix of this, right? So conjugate, in my mind, obviously you got your maths effort, dynamic effort, repetition effort. And I've had the pleasure to talk to other conjugate coaches in the country, and get in contact with them and pick their brains, such as Michael Fahey, Brendan Ladders. Amazing guy, dude. I've contacted him and he sent me a whole entire voicemail that is like 10 minutes long.
Nice.
So I'm glad about that. Zach Goodman.
There's some coaches that do that.
Dude,
There's some coaches that do that.
I couldn't be more happy. I have, other congregate coaches such as Brandon Bird, Jared Bidney. So we take a lot of influence from them, right? So as Zach Goodman said, conjugate is, you're training a variety of speeds for a variety of needs with maximal muscle tension. So what we typically do within our program, we box squat. People are going to talk crap about me right now. They're going to be like, your guys need to know how to full squat. Well, guess what? 25 minutes ago, I told you we full squat, we back squat too. It's somewhere in the podcast, right? But depending on what strength level they are, right? We do 5s, 3s, or singles, right? So 5s, triples, or singles. It's going to be a max effort, bot squat. Typically, we cycle through bars. So straight bar, safety bar, straight bar with chains, safety bar with chains. So accommodating resistance. Don't really do bands with our mats efforts. Logistically, it just doesn't work out because we get waves of at least 6 kids. Sometimes we get 8, 10. So if you think about an hour span, that's 30 kids max. So typically half and half, so 15 on the turf, 15 in the weight room, and that's pushing it, right? That's pushing our capacity. So logistically, it doesn't work out to do bands as much, but we do band work for accommodating resistance as well. But the reason why we do bot squats, and people are, like I said, they're going to talk crap about me, and they're going to say like, oh, it's not a real squat, it's not a real squat. Well, I'll give you the exact reason we're bot squatting, and I'll tell you exactly how we do it. And you got to tell me how you squat and why you're doing it too. And if you say it's what we've always done, I'll throw, I'm not a violent person, so never mind. So I'm just going to call you out. So the reason why we bot squat to a 12-inch box, and Jared Bidney, the way he does it is, unless you're 6'2", 6'3", or above, you're squatting to a 2-inch soft pad. And then so if you're above that, you get, I guess, more inches. I don't know what the exact conversion is for him. But Jared Bidney, oh my gosh, that guy's insane in the best way possible. But we squat down depending on femur length, right? Because not everyone's femurs are built the same, different leverages, different hip sockets, right? And I don't really coach stance that much unless I see something that needs to be changed. Typically, let's say like overpronation, knee values, simple things like that. And then after that, they squat down and they squat up. So the reason why they're doing it is, first off, yes, people are going to say, all right, with my squat, I'm chasing absolute strength, right? Yeah. Well, guess what? Your guys aren't powerlifters. Unless if they are powerlifters, woohoo, right? So, well, guess what? My guys, they're not powerlifters. And they're like, why aren't they squatting wide? They're not squatting wide enough. They're not training through a range of motion, because as we know, a range of motion that we train through is 15 degrees of carryover. And even Louis Simmons, he said, if you squat close, you can't squat wide. But if you squat wide, you can squat close. But my fellows, they're not in squat suits. So we squat to what feels comfortable for them. So they squat down, they break up the eccentric concentric chain. So we're focusing on the musculoskeletal system. And guess what? They got to shoot out that box, because if they don't, gravity's going to get them. And guess what? In sport situations, such as track and field on the blocks, you have receiver on the line, all that fun stuff, It's a static moment that has to be overcome dynamically. And guess what you need to be ahead of the competition? Rate of force development. And that's what we're getting from the bot squat. So we're still working on our absolute strength. We're working on our rate of force development, and we're focusing on the musculoskeletal system. That is why we squat. Tell me why we squat. So exactly. So people are going to talk crap. And what we do after, typically on our day ones, is we do a close stance high box squat. Close stance high box squat. It's a way for us to get a little bit more volume on the quads. And it's something we kind of got influenced by Jared Bidney. Fahey doesn't really do, like he said, he doesn't really coach stances too much, but it's a way to get our quads a little bit more volume, right? Because we don't do much volume on our accessories at all. Like I said, minimum effective dose. The fellas there to get a bunch of volume outside of the weight room in the sport. They're like, hey, coach, I played, 7 on 7, I played 7 on 7 for the past 3 days. I'm like, cool. And I also played 3 hours of pickup after. I'm like, amazing. You're not even a basketball player, man. I mean, have fun, but geez, give yourself some rest. So they already get a bunch of volume. And high school bros are gonna be bros. They're gonna be like, hey man, like my buddy has a garage gym. Let's get these reps of like arms, man. Let's get these triceps, let's get this bench. I'm like, oh dude, you did not, because man, those kids, they will not tell you what they did unless you really pick at it or trick them.
It's like it's trying to teach our athletes sport capacity and how much they actually need compared to what they actually do.
Exactly. There's this kid. I'm proud of him because he's really developed since he's been with us as not just physically, but as a leader and emotionally as well. And he's a good kid. But he's like, yeah, I've been doing this small off stuff. And I'm like, bro, you're already getting a bunch of volume. Your quad hurts because you've been running in the morning. I've been telling you, your jumps haven't been getting higher. I had to show him, stop it. And then that just happened recently too. So hopefully he listens. If not, it's gonna bite him in the butt, right? And then that's I'm glad that the problem is I gotta pull him back and not push him.
Yeah.
But I still don't want that problem, right? But anyways, we do a high box squat. Typically, the reason why we do this as well, it's a higher strength stimulus. And we're doing triples on this, so it's technically our back downs, so brief maximal tension, but we do it to a 17-inch box typically. So that's just another pad on top of whatever squat you squat to. And there's a higher correlation with this for vertical jump. I mean, I was doing that back in the day, so hopefully that's something.
And that's why you're so springy.
Not anymore, but back a little bit back. But even if you look at old school track and field, so such as triple jump and long jump, there's a video that PJF Paul Favorites he posted a long time ago. It's these old school track and field guys. They're doing depth jumps on boxes. They're doing quarter squats. They're doing pin squats to 45 degrees. So it's not ass to grass by any means, right? But that has a higher correlation with vertical jump height compared to a deep squat. It's more specific movement. But we also do a low bot squat, not on our day one, on our day two. And that's just, we're training throughout the range of motion. So that's that's a little closer to what Bidney does, because we got the 12-inch bots plus the 2-inch pad, and you got to fire out of that. And then for our back downs on our day one, we do a 3RM back squat as well. So we're still back squatting. So yes, we back squat. We just don't want to
the biggest thing about S&C coaching as well is we're not teaching sport, we teach movement. And that's where I'm sort of so my company is Primitive Athletics. We go back down to the very primate movements. Can you crawl effectively? Can you hinge at the hip? Can your knees bend effectively? Can your ankles move effectively? Can you bridge neck? Just get up like a baby, roll around. I think that art is lost in this social media phase where people are looking for the fanciest exercises to show off.
Yeah.
But squat properly. Can your knees and hips bend at the same time? Can you hinge? Can your shoulder effectively go back enough for you to catch something. Like, is it stable? Is your shoulder stable? Is your neck strong enough to withstand some of the positional movements that you have to be? Because like movement comes from, like, it goes from floor up. So even in rotational stuff, everything comes from your ankle. Boxing, pivoting comes from that ankle. Is that strong enough to take you through all these movements? And I think that's a lost art. And it's like we're teaching movement, but we need to look at what they do on the field. So what they do on the field determines what we do in the gym. We need to get their movements through those movements strong. And I think that's something that you've obviously touched on, is like you squat to there because development, you have to go from 0 to 100. So like if you look at a linear, and Ryan put it best when during that podcast, is like vertical to go horizontal to go vertical, because it's not gravity that's pulling you back. It's not someone pulling you back, it's gravity pushing you down. That's affecting how your movement is happening.
I've never seen you that fired up in my life. And you don't get fired up.
I don't, but like movement is like, that's what I like. I like to go through movements, and if someone can show me correct movements, I'm in heaven. And I think that's something that me and you have always connected on, is like, you know, the more scientific aspects of it, but I just like to watch move effectively, and I'll watch, and I can correct it. I'll correct it if need be, but like if you're just moving effectively, I'm happy. Like there is nothing better than when you get an athlete that you don't have to cue. Obviously, we still call the cues to like make sure that when that it's the same thing. Like when your mind gets tired, everything goes out the window. So it's just having that someone being like, okay, when you're coming up, pull the carpet apart. Pulling the carpet apart makes your knees track with your ankles or with your feet when you're squatting. It's just like these little cues that make the movement more effective.
Okay, absolutely. It's always the weird cues that work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's the ones that stick with especially with the younger fellas. They're like, man, all right. And then right, I'm like, I had to get to this obscurity for you to do this. So anyway, anyways, yeah, but like, yeah,
No,
that's yeah. You hit on the button. So
yeah,
yeah, but
like
even
this
yeah.
is no. So sorry, you go.
Oh no, I was just gonna talk about squatting more. Go ahead. Yeah, you're fine.
Fair. This is like I kind of wanted you to come on, is because you've got like this unique sight into movement performance and S&C, and like with your like sort of background, and now going into S&C, and like having the clinical side and the S&C side kind of merges the both worlds together. And I think I always say this, it's like the sporting world isn't just physiology, it's not just biomechanics, it's not just sort of psychology of it. It's like you have to have everything. Like S&C is just like a hybrid of everything. You need to know physiology, like what is it doing, what stimulants am I hoping for, what adaptations am I hoping for. Biomechanics, you need to know, okay, knees and hips are bending at the same time. If they're not, why is that happening? If So you need psychology, a kid can't get past that weight, why? Like a good technique that I use is I get them to sort of be silly for a while. So like my favorite one is like if they can't get past a number, I'll put like a bit of tissue either tucked into their shorts or on their collar, just so that can focus on that and not the weight. And then like that, they get it. Try it next time you have an athlete and he's like stuck on a specific like technique or a specific weight. Do something that's going to make him feel silly for like a split second during his lift. It has to be during the lift. Like
Yeah.
tuck a tissue, tuck a band down his shorts or something. Not you personally. Let him do that. Like if as soon as he gets that silly feeling, he'll forget about what's actually happening, why he's got that block. And I think that's how I've always sort of just stayed on top of like that progressive overload with everyone.
Oh yeah, dude. I mean, what Fahey does, Michael Fahey, he tells his kids if they're kind of having like I think they're having like a rough patch, or they haven't found PR. That was like, he's like, go outside, look at the clouds, tell me what you see. And then he's like, three of his kids are like, I just think about what that cloud looks like. And then the other kid's like, oh, I'm just thinking about how light water vapor has to be, stuff like that. And another kid is just like, man, that sky is blue. So you got to kind of, the psychology part of it, right? It's such a huge part of it with S&C, whether if you're coaching or, trying to help kids get over block too as well. It's an art in itself. It's art in itself. Like you said, we can't just be programmers. We can't just be screamy, yell. We got to be psychologists. You have to be therapists a little bit at times in terms of injuries a little bit, if especially you don't have access to that. I'm not saying do something that's out of your scope of practice, but know how to do lateralizations, the US's progressions, know what's right. But yeah, I mean you hit on the button with that.
Yeah. So like something else that I wanted you to kind of dive into was, I know you've done a couple talks in clinics and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You just want to dive into them a little bit.
Yeah. Well, let's see. So recently I was able to be part of a whole entire research group, and I don't love research, to be honest with you. it's the whole process of collecting data. I'm glad I got to do it. I'm glad I was considered to be part of it, and we got done with it and we presented on it. But man, it is
hard work.
It's hard work, a lot of writing. I'm not an English major, so it's, I'm an exercise science guy. So that's I'll tell you that. But something that we did a research project on, it's me, Jared Hubble, and Leanna Castaneda. They're great. They're great peers of mine. What we did was measure, man, it's been a while. That's how much I kind of stay away from research. It's just like, man, it just isn't too much. But the effects of myofascial release on the subscapularis regarding isokinetic dynamometry through internal and external rotation. And what we found is we did 2 talks on it after a whole year-long research project on it. Our population was pretty young, so we didn't have a huge demographic of it. So what we we originally thought, we hypothesized was there going to be any reciprocal inhibition once we would do the subscap release, right? So if you've never done a biodex before, it's an isokinic dynamometer. So what that means, it's regulated by velocity, right? So our participants, they were in seated position. They go through internal, external rotation a couple times just to get a gist of it. So there's not a learning curve. We would do, some trial runs, and then I'm not the one to explain this very great. Like I said, I'm not the researcher, but, we do a couple trial runs. We do our subscapularis release. And then before that, there's a bunch of protocols too, such as warm up and all that, informed consent, all that fun stuff, right? So after the myofascial release, whether that would be the intervention, if you didn't get it, you're in the control, right? So what we found was, and they retested, retrial, we found was there was increase of range of motion of external rotation, but there wasn't any increase or significant amounts of increase for torque values, right? For internal, external rotation. And we did have some volleyball athletes on there, but because it is randomized, one of them was in the control group. So we were like, no, and we didn't already have a huge population to begin with. So that's why research, being on both sides of the coin, research, is great. I reference research a lot, but depending on what literature you read, it has to be taken with a grain of salt. And you can't just be looking at abstract. You can't just be like, this study showed that vertical jump height went up. Well, they've never trained before, right? Yep.
Yeah.
Dude, you could throw sandbags at people and they will jump higher in a couple weeks. So
yeah.
So exactly.
The thing is about research as well that I think a lot of people need to be careful with, it's everything is controlled. Everything, like down to however long they're spending in the lab, is controlled. Everything they're eating the night before can be controlled. Everything like in their daily lives can be controlled before that they can get this specific number. So I think referencing research is great. You kind of need to sort of coach effectively, but it's knowing what you're wanting to look for, and if they've done that in the effective way possible.
Yeah, exactly. Going back to the clinics and speaking, my first presentation after that, talking about that research project, it was about 50 people. I'm not a public speaker. No, I don't love it. I didn't go to school for public speaking, but we got it done. It was great to hear that input from professionals and professors. And then the second time we talked about it was at a biomechanics symposium, right? I am not a biomechanist. I don't have my PhD. I am not a master's student. I graduated and I have this research project. So what it was is we pulled up and everyone has their name tags. It's like PhD from Central Washington University, a Master's of Science from Leeds Beckett, right? So people are coming from inside, outside the country, right? And I'll tell you, jump higher. I'll give you a whole spiel about what we do for programming. But
box squats.
and I don't, yeah, exactly. I don't speak the language of research so much, and then most people that honestly reference research, other S&C coaches, dude, do you know what a chi-squared test is? Do you know what a ANOVA is? Do you know what a t-test is? Man, like I went through that. I don't love it. So if you could tell me everything on that sheet, you're probably solid. But at the end of the day, you gotta be careful. So you gotta know how to interpret data as well. And that's why these tests are so important, and it shows the validity, reliability, and that's a whole pain doing as well. The whole chi-square ANOVA t-test as well. So, and then the biomechanics symposium, it had 500 people. So it's definitely a huge step up.
Just a little
It was
bit.
one of those. What was that?
Just a little bit.
Oh man, huge. That's 100% technically, or 10 times.
10%, 10 times.
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, man. So luckily, you got to talk to everyone a little bit, get some food. So it kind of eased in a little bit, got to relax. So it wasn't so tense. As I said, I'm not a public speaker, but it was cool because we got a bunch of questions and input from people that are researchers, and they didn't really know my background. We didn't have time to give a background. I wish I did, but we were under time constraints, right? So they're just like, oh, this guy is a researcher. He's not really doing research lingo. I'm like, man, I'm an S&C coach, man. Run fast, jump high, lift heavy. So that's the meathead side of it. Oh my gosh. Anyways,
I love the meathead side.
Yep, exactly. But arm farm all day, baby. But 500 people. After that, we got pretty much separated into focus groups, and we got to talk about, what you find in your study, all that, and it was a great experience. I don't plan on doing research again anytime soon. But it was a great experience, and
I think that's what's different about the sort of UK university and sort of America universities as well. Is like these are a lot more exams and tests, and we're more science-based research. Like at the end of every year, you have your dissertation. You have to run your own trial. You have to make sure everything's typed up. And then you go masters. It's the same thing. You've got modules. By the end, you've got dissertation. PhD is just a different thing at all, because it's 2-3 years of just pure research. You have to come up with, I think it's 3 research papers. So it's very research heavy here.
It's my nightmare right there. But fun times.
Yeah.
Can you too much research?
Too much research. I was just going back to your coaching, because obviously you've just said that obviously you've got different types of athletes coming in and doing different types of work. What kind of sports are you seeing from a day to day?
Oh man, because we don't advertise us as just training one sport. I don't want to do that. I want to make sure I get everyone under the sun. I don't just want to work with football. I don't want to just work with MMA. even though it's a sport that, you know, I spent a lot of time in. I don't want to just do basketball. I want to do everyone, right? I want to, like, honestly, one of my goals as an SNC coach, yes, create one of the best programs out there. Great. Yeah, that's one of the things. I think everyone is like that of some sort, right? You know, that coincides with their, you know, athletes' desires and goals. But my thing is too, like, especially, you know, once we get our pro guys and college guys, you know, they're kind of, you know, they're matured and stuff like that. But our, you know, high school and youth, you know, they're almost yearning for a coaching figure. You know, I want to make sure that regardless, whatever you do in life, whatever, you know, you go pro, you go college, you create a company, whatever you decide to do, you get your master's, whatever you do, I want to be your number one fan. I want to make sure I'm there for you. I want to make sure you know I'm there for you. I want to make sure, you know, through these little lollipop moments that hopefully I could affect change, because I'm not going to change the world. You know, my way of, you know, affecting the world is through SNC, right? So I'm not going to change the world myself, but hopefully I could spark someone's idea to, you know, change the world for a better place, and change their life for, you know, better as well. Because I know as a high schooler, I could desire that as well. I've had great coaches, you know, but it's the coaches I ran into really focused on my sport. You know, it's sport. You're out. Let's get some results, right? And then that's what I was about. I was a robot. That's what I was about. But there's a connection that was missing, right? So yeah, we get lacrosse, we get football, basketball, swimming. I have my swimmer squat still. Yes, you don't gotta swim with a dang what's it called?
If you're coming off the blocks, you're in a squat position.
Exactly. You don't get, like, I remember there was talking to someone and they're like, I need my athlete to be swimming with like a weight vest, right? I'm like, first of all, I put you through the whole thing, right? Like, you see our facility, we don't got no pool. I wish we did. And I'm talking to, you know, I'm translating it into a much calmer tone. So, but and I'm like, man, like, your kid can't even do a squat. So why am I going to even load him when he's already swimming all day? Why am I going to have him put weights in his hand doing these, you know, funny drills that, you know, that if he can't even move properly, you know, the man is 11 years old. You know, he's young. He needs to know how to move his body. He's got to create more neural pathways. He's got to become a better mover. Once he becomes a better mover, we got to load those movements. Once we load those movements, it's going to translate to the turf, translate to his sport. So, like I said, we get a bunch of everyone under the sun regarding that. But like I said, everyone squats unless you got contraindication or something of that sort. We also got a belt squat. We got a West Side Barbell ATP athletic training platform, belt squat. And that thing, yes, we use it for belt squatting, but we use that thing. That's the jump machine. Brandon Bird has said it. That's the jump machine right there. Because what we do, of course, I might talk even more about programming, but so
I want you to. That's one of the things I want to dive into as well.
Yeah. So, like I said, we do our squats, all that stuff, and then we're talking about our day one here, and of course we do our accessory lifts and all that. We do trap bar deadlift day one, but we do marches. So marches for 30 seconds, as heavy as you can. So I've talked to other coaches that have this machine. You know, Michael Fahey, he said his kids go from 495 to 550 on that machine. Usually he does he just has loading pins, but the time that he has at TPs, he gets them up to 550. And then my kids, man, they're like, man, this 25 on each side is so heavy. You know, they're like, oh man, this 45 on each side is so heavy. I'm like, guess what? I got this buddy in Tallahassee, and he has his fellows your age do this. And of course, I'm not just telling that to them if they're not capable of it. But if they're just yapping about it, I'm like, man, if you could talk to me during this, throw on some weight. It's not 2 minutes. He does 2 minutes. That's a lot. I do 30 seconds. 30 seconds. That's all I need from you. And then we do our dumbbell jumps. Dumbbell jumps are from Jared Bidney. And
I'm
typically
going to quickly pull up this video because it emphasizes your point.
Oh yeah,
This
exactly.
is
Yeah.
He's a coach that I've followed for a while, and he's like some of the content that he posts is just phenomenal. Because he's always just pushing that march freeze. You need to know how to effectively move that way as well.
Yeah, because the march is we do wide stance, so we don't get the foot off the ground as high because we go so dang heavy. And then sometimes, depending on what deficiencies they have, whether post train, their quads, I'll have them, if they're really weak in the post train, I'll have them take a couple steps forward and like, coach, I can't, like this thing's pulling me back. I'm like, all right, then that's exactly what we want. They're like, I'm feeling it in my hamstrings and my glutes. I'm like, perfect, that's money. Give me 20 more seconds. And if they need a little bit more quad work, I have them take a couple steps back. Then they're loading up the quads a little bit more through 30 seconds. And as I said, we throw that in with the dumbbell jumps. We do dumbbell jumps at the end of our workout. And, traditional S&C coaching would be like, you're doing a high velocity movement towards the end of your workout with a GPP exercise. Are you sure you're an S&C coach? And I'm like, let me tell you this, man. So what we do with the ATP squat, it's a potentiation effect. And I've talked to Fahey about this. I honestly, like, in terms of potentiation, most people's idea of potentiation, you do heavy squat or you do an isometric, or it's Matt's, fatigue or Matt's intense. And then you're doing something after to potentiate that, right? So we get a potentiation effect, and all of our training ages, whether if you've been training with me for 2 weeks or 2 years, after they use that, typically, unless they're really weak at the ankle or don't have good GPP, they get a PR on their dumbbell jumps or on their regular jumps. In our regular jumps, that's a high velocity movement. So through a full workout, they're PRing on their static jumps on a plyo mat. We use plyo mat. We also have a jump mat. We don't use it as much. We use it just when it gets busy, just because the numbers are a little off for the conversions. But we use a plyo mat typically because we get to measure RSI on that as well. It's a great tool. Yeah, we do RSI early on in the workout before we even hit squats. But we do dumbbell jumps, and that's what we do in lieu of Olympic lifting. Because what are you chasing for in Olympic lifts? Well, people are going to say triple extension, intense. They're going to be like, oh, it's a hinge pattern. Well, how do you do your cleans? How do you do them? First of all, they're like, yeah, we do from the floor, power. We're going to go 100%, 90%. Well, guess what? That's too slow. What are you trying to do? You're trying to clean better, right? Because cleans are too fast to make you strong, and they're too slow to make you fast. Even Randy Huntington has talked about it before. He does cleans, first of all, because his fellows have done early specialization in Olympic lifts, but primarily it just helps you get out the blocks. And Rolf Altman has even said it himself. Cleans, all this stuff, it's not necessary. They also got Kaiser equipment, a bunch of Kaiser equipment. So, that's pretty cool. So I wish I had
that. Some of the stuff that I actually wanted to ask you about, obviously you've just touched on it, is like the way you get faster is by sprinting. And you've posted some videos on it before.
Oh,
whereas you're essentially pushing as supported, but you're pushing as fast as you can. And then this is the box squat that you were talking about.
Yeah, that was after I got too. That was a great training session.
So it's some of that stuff, that high velocity, high impact movements that you're going through. And then that was going to be the programming question, is like, how do you effectively program that for your athletes?
The high velocity movements. Okay, so yeah, high velocity movements. So it's unweighted or it has to be super light. Like a clean, we don't do cleans. We do on our day threes, we do high pulls sometimes. I think dumbbell jumps are still better because you got dumbbells. Everyone's got dumbbells, right? Everyone knows how to jump. You're gonna get max power outputs from dumbbell jump versus when you clean, it's more technique, right? Of course, clean is a great tool. I think someone that has used the clean really well is Bill Gillespie, and like I said, Bill Gillespie, he helped DJ, so one of my the co-owner of Maximum Sports Conditioning, get into the industry. But before Liberty was a D1 school, Liberty, it's a school here in the U.S. He had 21 players that cleaned more than 400 pounds. Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, and including a kid under 200 that cleaned 475. So man, that is insane, right? But he would use his cleans in lieu of speed deadlift. So instead of a dynamic effort deadlift, he would use his cleans. And he typically, traditional West Side, 30, 35, 40%, right? Sometimes they, not traditional West Side, but Bill, I believe so. Or I could be thinking of someone else, to be honest. But you're going no more than 50% because after that, it's too slow. The cleans are too slow. It's not fast enough to create an adaptation. Right. So it's at 30, 35, 40%, 50%. I believe I read a paper about that's where Matt's force outputs are produced, not Matt's power, Matt's force. So it's different parts of the equation, right? Force is, like I said, power equals force times velocity. And force is half the equation right there. If you include the sum, that's 30%. So if you're looking at just force, that's a failing grade. That's 33%, man. You want a failing grade in jumping, go for it. But even Louis, regarding Olympic lifts, he was originally an Olympic lifter in high school. He gained 20 pounds on his clean in 4 years. It's not a lot. Not a lot, right? That's 5 pounds a year. And guess what? He also gained 10 pounds of mass. Mass moves mass. So if you get heavier, I hope you could, move things a little bit heavier. So, and then I think his squat was at 400. And after 4 years, it went to 410. So he added 2.5 pounds on his squat throughout per year, right? So that's not a huge significance in terms of adaptation or change, right? So Oli lifts don't make you stronger. And when you think about it, you are limited in your Oli lift by your front squat. And you're limited in your front squat by your back squat. Because typically, 85% of your front squat is based off your back squat. And that's really pushing it, right? And guess what? 85% of your clean is based off your front squat. So now because, people are going to be like, oh, yeah, my kids they're getting stronger because we're doing cleans. That's all they're young. They're really young. They haven't had any adaptation whatsoever. But give it a couple months. They're not going to get stronger. And they're like, yeah, we don't really box squat. We don't really push our squats. We're doing 4x10. Well, man, you gotta get that neural input. You have to get that stronger. If you want to see your cleans go up, if that's what you really care about, sure, that's the way to do it. Cleans, I said, it's a tool. I program it for some people, but it's not everything.
But can you just explain sort of what day 1, day 2, day 3 means?
Yeah. So, like I said, we're not an organization where like the athlete has to come in. So it's not like your sport coach was like, hey, if you don't go in, you're getting reduced playing time, right? And we're not out of school. We work with multiple schools and everything of that sort. So typically you're day 1. And if they're only coming in twice a week, that's kind of difficult, right? Obviously, I would prefer 4 times a week. You get your max effort, lower max effort, upper, dynamic effort, upper, or dynamic effort, lower, dynamic effort, upper, right? But truth is, it's a business. And, they come in twice a week sometimes, or they come in 3 times a week. So if they're only doing twice a week, we're going to do full body, right? Their bench press, yes, I care about it. It has a correlation to exit reload for baseball, has a correlation with sprinting as well, especially close grip bench press. Rolf Homan, he has his track and field guys do close grip bench press. I don't know the exact protocol because he doesn't really max out. He said, I don't know how much my guys lift, but I know how fast they lift. And the reason for this is he uses metrics such as elastic acceleration, dynamic isometric strength, which is the last few degrees of eccentric phase, and your ability to get out of it. So the concept phase. So it's an elasticity index. And then elastic acceleration, peak velocity, EAPV, it's as again, like I said, it's peak velocity. So it's not, don't overcomplicate it regarding that. And then there's TPV, time to peak velocity, which is an acceleration index. And acceleration is a KPI for his program for many things, right? So acceleration actually moves the force velocity curve. Velocity doesn't move the force velocity curve. Acceleration skews that curve, right? So once we have, our acceleration down, or if like my guys are fatigued, not my guys, but if I ran a program like Rolf's, then dude, I've had Kaiser. Oh my gosh, I've had 1080 Kaiser calf. Oh man, I'm drooling over it. But yeah, so that's the metrics he uses. I believe I would imagine he would use that for his bench press as well, rather than just doing a typical, dynamic or max effort. So yeah, we have our bench. We have people bench. Let's see, where was I at? Full body. We have trap bar, and then we do our accessories. We do a lot of reverse hyper. We do a lot of GHR. We get our triceps down, because a lot of people, tricep or the bench is a tricep exercise. There are people that will do their pec decks, all that fancy stuff. But now, guess what I'm doing right here? I'm internally rotating and pushing. So guess what muscle that does that? My tricep, especially the big meaty part near, at least, not people have the big meaty part, but, proximal to my elbow. That's the muscle you really want to work on. And like I said, the reason why that's important is to helps exit below, helps sprinting mechanics too, because arm drive. So we do a lot of accessories as well. And typically our weight room work takes 1 hour for our day one. And like I said, we're throwing in kind of special exercises as well, such as, your slow jabs, your clams, all that fun stuff as well. And we're doing the ATP marches. Man, I'm telling you, that is probably one of the best pieces of equipment that I've recently used and programmed recently. It's amazing. Everyone's been getting like 2-3 inch PRs, and it's insane. And not just in that session, but over time as well, in their dumbbell jumps and their static jumps. But besides the weight room work, and we do core work as well, anti-rotation, ab wheel, fun stuff. But 30 minutes, I haven't even touched up on the turf work at all yet. Just weight room. Yeah. So our turf work, first thing they come in, they warm up, obviously. We sprint all our athletes. Doesn't matter if you're a swimmer, doesn't matter if you're a volleyball player, you need to have that speed reserve. Doesn't matter if you're a cross country skier, you still need that eccentric rate of force development, because guess what? When you're jumping, you're absorbing all that force. And when you got change direction as well, you need that reserve. Because guess what? When we sprint, we do feed the cat style. So Tony Holler, very low volume. And then we'll do a couple drills in between that as well. We do sit sprints, so nothing crazy. Now that the weather is nice, we do flying 10s. So it's 20 yards. On our day twos, we do a 5-yard lead in, so 25 yards. And then we got kids running 20, 21, 22, 23. It's insane. It's insane. Nice. That's why I got to keep running. That's why I got to keep going. I can't let them show me up. But hey, if they do, I guess I'm doing my job. So
specifically for training as well, like what's your sort of views on the quad to hamstring ratios?
Everyone, especially these kids, they need hamstring. So that's why we push the GHR so much, and we post most of our accessories are post chain. Right, it's very west side biased, I guess you could say. We do run a conjugate program, and then I've been on the Biodex before, where we do measure quad hamstring ratio, and there's no one I'm telling you that has I guess healthy ratio, but healthy is a term deemed by research, not by S&C coaches. And people still run fast, even though if they're quad dominant or got more quad than hamstring in terms of strength, but definitely need more hamstring, because when we're sprinting, typically when you injure your hamstring, you injure at the apex of flexion or ground contact, right? And if you're sprinting, especially if you're an athlete, and let's say if you're a football, so you're running at practice, right? And like I said, we can't always control what they do at practice. We don't know what they're doing all the time. So we don't beat up the hamstrings too much in terms of going like Nordics. Nordics, it's high eccentrically, so you're gonna be sore. You're gonna be beat up, right? Because most people can't do a full Nordic, so that's why we do GHR. And we also get that full flexion of the knee, right? Because that's a component that you need to strengthen because it's a common place to get injured during sprints. So apex.
Can you just explain where the two points of injury?
Oh yeah, so when you're running, so when you're pulling, technically this is arguable, but if you're doing a 40-yard dash, it's all pushing. You're not really supposed to be pulling. 100 meters too. Randy and Rolf have said that it's still pushing. You can't pull. If you pull, it's too slow. But I don't really want to stand up. But when you're running, so let's see this. Does that work out? So
yeah.
So this right here, this is my knee, right? If I bring it back here, that's one of the first points of contact that gets injured a lot. So once my hamstring, my knee goes into flexion, and then let's see, right there. Okay. So once my foot strikes the ground, so ground contact, that is another point of the hamstrings getting injured as well. So typically those are the two most common places or movements that the hamstring gets injured in during sprinting. So, you don't want to beat up the hamstrings too much. You can't do just fast movements or oscillatories all the time. I see people doing that. It makes sense if you got block periodization. We don't do block periodization. Typically, block periodization is really hard to work with because people they're doing their school team, and sometimes they coincide with a club team as well. So they're playing two teams, and then guess what their off season looks like? 1 week, and then they're playing another sport, or they're doing club team and traveling again. So block periodization or traditional periodization doesn't really work in our program, right? So as I said, Conjugate is training a variety of speeds for a variety of needs. So we're training all qualities. What were we just talking about? Sprints, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So
we're talking about the points of injury and how to sort of mitigate that in a sense.
Yeah. So it's a lot of shearing forces, right? So, in the weight room, you almost want to reduce shearing forces. Of course, you got your dynamic effort day, and of course, shearing forces on the tendons that's what sports is about, right? And that's why we got our max effort days. I mean, it's more slow. You get a stress relaxation response from the tendon, and that's from Dr. Keith Barr. And he is a consultant for many teams as well. But what he even says is when they're playing after game day, his basketball players that he's consulted for, they're maxing out after because all that sheer force from the jumping and upper body forces, or, he'll have the max squat to what's applicable. So I don't know what he does in terms of his protocol, whether if it's a box squat, full squat, Zercher, whatever. I know Corey Schlesinger, he uses Zerchers a lot, but he's going for a rep max. So he's going really slow velocities, right? Because it's so much shearing forces already. So that's how we mitigate it. We do, like I said, train general in the weight room, specific in, your sporting environment. So, and then also after the sprints, like I said, we do specific drills in between. That machine that I was running on is called the shred mill, and it's an insane marketing name, right? It's just the shred mill. So a traditional treadmill or even a high-speed treadmill, right? You set it to a certain speed in the track moves, right? And then you got to match that speed or you're falling. So there we go. And we actually got to talk to the creator of the shred mill. It's Tony Villani, and he works out of XPE in Florida. And he makes insanely fast guys. From 2017, 10 people have gone sub 4.3 40-yard dash. 80% of them were his guys. And he uses the shred mill because what you get after the shred mill run, you get a force, you get an acceleration curve. And that coincides with the weaknesses that you have on the ground. So then he's like, oh, we got to hammer more Poland. We got to handle hammer force. Oh, we got to hammer form. We got to hammer force to form because your transition, as we can see. So it's a tool that we use. I mean, it's really useful too. Seattle right now, we're banging on the last days of decent weather. So eventually we're going to have to close up the doors and no more 20-yard flies, right? It's going to be 10-yard and then 10-yard with a 5-yard lead in. So that's where the treadmill is really helpful, right? You could run 20 yards on that thing. You could run 40, 60 yards. We don't have people run 40, 60 yards. It's too fatiguing in one training session to then go on into the weight room, right? Especially without adequate rest. But, I mean, Tony Villani has made some fast people. Tariq Woolen and DJ Turner. Tariq Woolen's actually a local Seahawks guy. They're both 4.2 sets guys. DJ Turner and Tariq Woolen. And then Kalen Barnes, he's a 4.23 guy. That's insanely fast, right? So he uses a treadmill, and we use a similar protocol. I know he does it. He sets up the treadmill with weight room work, and you keep going until the treadmill speeds lower down. And it's magnetic resistance, by the way. So And I tell people, that is probably a point I should have taken up. But it's magnetic resistance, and the closer the magnets are to the track, the more resistance there's going to be. So it goes from 0 to 10. And I think Mark Ingram, he gets like 14, 15 miles an hour at resistance 10. And if you've never been on the treadmill, you're probably going to be like 14, 15 miles an hour. And yeah, that's cool, right? Man, you try to push on that thing, you're slow molasses, man. I've tried at 10. I think I've gotten like 12 or 13 one time. Yeah, but it was a little bit ago. It's hard. It's taxing.
Yeah. I kind of wanted to ask you about I found this quite interesting. When you were talking about the marches, you talked about the quad and hamstring. And like that's something that I've recently did a lot of research on, like to the latter part of my uni degree. And I found out like how important that actually is and what that actually means. So the fact that you use the marches to load that, I kind of want you to break that down a little bit more.
Yeah, so you could bias because the ATP. I know like the one in bell squat, you can't really do it because the pulley doesn't allow you to move. But for the ATP, you could step forward and you could step backward, right? And you can move on. If you want to, you could jump on that thing too. But I don't have anyone jump on that. I don't want to do no harm. So I'll have majority of people, unless they have a quad deficiency. Let's say if like, oh, coach, like, my PT told me I have quad tendonitis, right? Then I'll have them march backwards. So I'll have them take a couple steps backwards and load that quad a little bit more, because you have to use your quads or else you're going to fall on your face. But majority of people, I'll tell them, okay, take a couple steps forward so we can load that hamstring. They're like, coach, it's been 10 seconds. I don't feel it. Oh, yeah, I feel it. So, yeah, and the reason why we do this as well, it's a slow velocity movement, so less chain forces. So we do use it for post-chain, like I said, hamstrings and glutes, but we also use it for our ankle, right? That ankle, and this is about to go into my foot talk right here.
I should have had the slides.
Yeah, I have the slides somewhere, but it's I'll look for it later. We'll talk about it. But yeah, with the foot, right? So I'm not, the biggest proponent on, hey man, take off your shoes, you're running barefoot. There's been a huge trend of that. I'm not against barefoot shoes, but the end of the day, you're gonna run in cleats, right? So anything that I do, it's gonna be counteracted by what you do in your sport. So it's I think Chu even mentioned it. He asked me about the foot stuff and the ankle stuff, and he's like, so the philosophy you take on it is almost like, high altitude training, like live high, train low. And I was like, exactly. But like I said, if everyone can get barefoot shoes, that's cool. If you don't, it's not the end of the world, right? If you even look at and I think I was a really big proponent on this of the neutral foot, like you gotta have a neutral foot. But if you look at Usain Bolt, that man, his feet are jacked up. That man, those are straight up flippers, right? If you look at LeBron James, KD, they could slap box me with their feet if they wanted to, right? So these are the most athletic human beings in the world, right? So does that mean, you don't need a neutral foot or a strong foot to, be athletic? Now, what it is I'll talk about the foot a little bit. So what I'm talking about, and you've been there for the presentation, is a neutral foot, a flat foot, and a high arched foot. Now, high arched isn't that common. That just means it's overactive arch, and then that's usually counteracted by myofascial release, some soft tissue therapy, and everything of that sort. But the main focus is on flat feet, right? So the whole idea, it's the win-last mechanism. So let's see. Let's see. So if this is my foot, right? You could, if you've ever done a PT workout where you could do a foot arch, or you kind of do a towel grab. The whole idea is, yes, you do want your toes curling, but you want that arch rising. So what the windlass mechanism is, it's your first ray. So your first ray of your toes, it's your navicular, and then it's your calcaneus. So it's a lever. That's exactly what it is. So now, like, you got to think, what intrinsic muscles of the foot are weak if someone has a flat foot? Yes, that may be the case. But you're saying Usain Bolt is weak? That man, even though he is a lower body dominant sport, that man benches 3 plates plus some change. Yeah. So you're telling me that foot is weak? Probably not. But what it is because, we got to think about the fascia system as well, and connective tissues, plantar fascia. If those intrinsic muscles, it's hypothetically weak, why is he running so fast? Why is he able to not down-regulate his force in order for his ankle to feel stable? So neurologically, but neurologically, in his body, his foot is strong enough. So what does that mean? That just means for his long foot, now it's a better lever. So now he has, apparently, and I don't know the details behind this, he does have a strong foot. He has a strong foot because he can maintain his forces, but he's the fastest man in the world, and at max velocity, his ground contact time is at 0.082 seconds. So if he got stronger, does that mean he could get to 0.01? Probably. Or does that just mean his body isn't comfortable at that? Who knows? It's a bunch of things, right?
I think as well, for athletes like that, it's like it's bodily dependent. And if we go back to the quad to hamstring ratios, when I was having a look at the studies, there's no normal because you are the normal. Like so when I was doing the dynameters, I scored I think it was a 0.4. Yeah, 0.4, which in research is looked as healthy. But I actually hyperextend my knees. So biomechanically, that's not good.
Yeah.
But I have very, very strong hamstrings. Like when we obviously did a workshop on hamstrings solely, I could get the full GHR. Like, my hamstrings are strong. But if you're looking at me as an athlete, I hyperextend my knees a lot, which would mean that that's a weakness.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's a great point. I remember, I think Chu even talked about it in the first podcast about the hamstring stuff. But yeah, so regarding the foot, so obviously Bolt, his foot is strong enough to regulate the forces that he's producing. So what that means now, Bolt he is full of mechanical advantage. So if you look at that foot, it's a strong foot. Now it's longer, so that means he has more leverage. And he's not a technician. You could argue that. But if you see someone like Asafa Powell for a 100-meter dash, that man is one of the cleanest runners you'll see. But for Bolt, he's full of mechanical advantage. He has that genetic adaptation for him to, excel in his sport. While you look at someone like Su Bengteng, right? I mean, he's one of the fastest accelerators of all time. I believe his 60 is 6.59, his 60 meter, and then his 100 meters 9.83. It could be 9.89 and 6.53. Could be totally wrong. But those are some for the 60 meter. That is insane. That is some insane. But he doesn't have mechanical advantage. You see him; he's got some big old quads. But even Rolf and Randy has said it. They might not have the most they might not have the genetic lottery in terms of who they got for track and field. You know, they don't got the long Achilles tendons that you see from like Bolt and Safa, but what they got is technology and coaching. And man, they don't even speak the same language. There's a language barrier because, you know, and then you got to think about how do you communicate this to the athletes. And then I know at times they said they don't even have translators. So now you're telling me, you know, a guy got up to 6'5", 6'9", and then you're telling me he also got a 9'8", 9'9". I could be totally wrong. I know I'll think of the numbers. It has to be exact. But without, you know, with a language barrier, that just goes back to the power of coaching. But back to the foot as well. You know, like you said, the normal is normal for you. You know, so typically, you know, if you look at in a clinical setting, you know, that pes planus foot, that flat foot, you know, you can look at it and like, you know, that's the reason why he has plantar fasciitis, yada yada yada. You know, I don't know the whole protocol behind plantar fasciitis, but you know, that's, you know, does that mean you have to create intrinsic strength so that this person could have a normal arch? You know, that's up for you to decide, right? But it's a thought. It's a thought. But regarding the marching again, that is one of our ways to strengthen the ankle complex as well. Because if you have a weak ankle, you're going to downregulate your strength. You're going to downregulate force, and then you're not going to be able to sprint as fast. And then if you got weak ankle too, if your body doesn't naturally downregulate it, it's a kinetic force leakage. So now that I'm not dorsiflexed when I'm running, so I'm not stab, 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 I have this, you know, this bounce to it. It's like a Rolls Royce versus a F1 car. F1 car, you driving it, you're driving a bumpy road. It's not going to feel comfortable. You're going to feel every tiny rock. That Rolls Royce, you know, that's going to be nice and smooth, but you try to change direction, you try to go as fast as you can, the F1 car is going to beat you 100 times out of 100 times. So that goes down to stiffness and elasticity. And that's how we kind of build that through the ATP marches. And then, like I said, that Patain JSR jumps. We've gotten people to jump, on the plyo mat, because it's not inflated such as the jump mat. We got people 30, you know, and it's insane. It's insane, especially if we have our guys do ATP marches and dumbbell jumps every time they're in. So if they're in 3 days a week, we do it 3 days a week. If they're in 4 days a week, we do it 4 days a week. No one comes 6 days a week. You need the rest, man. Go home, play some video games, eat some breakfast. But
I'll go pizza.
There we go. Has all your macronutrients, but yeah, oh man. But regarding ankle strength as well, what I've really experimented with, because Chris Corfus and, like I said, Randy and Rolf, they use the Kaiser calf, and Sue, he produces 765 watts prior to, you know, implementing the Kaiser calf into his program. So 765 watts. We have a machine called the Ohm Run, which is an isokinetic running machine. So it could go from 1 to 10 miles per hour, and it also does constant force, and it could go more than 100 pounds, I believe. So we have people, they're running 765 for their average power outputs for the watts. So Sue's doing that just with his ankle. That is insane. And that's before implementation of a full Kaiser calf protocol, right? And eventually, I believe Rolf, I could totally get the numbers wrong, but it was I believe it was in the 2000s. 2000 watts is insane. So that's what he's producing because of that pneumatic and mass combo. So I've been really, honestly, that's kind of, I drool over that. That's something I really want. So, but we do seated calf as well. We do seated calf. And then I've experimented with bands on it as well. In order to kind of get in overspeed eccentric, and you got to control it and you got to reverse it as well. And it's not for everyone. You know, it's a single joint exercise. It's not for everyone. So we're not just doing that with, you know, some 11-year-olds. So it's a prescription as necessary. And like I said, I think I mentioned earlier, we do bands on our drop squats. So what it is, we have a bear cat or a super cat, or the bear squat. Some people call it the super cat. Some people call it the bear squat. We call it the bear squat. We got the bear squat. So all we're doing with that, I'm not looking for force. I'm not looking for force at all. What I'm looking for is dynamic isometric strength. So that last feature, so elasticity. So we put the bands on. you got your mass added to it, and you drop down and you reverse it as quick as you can, right? So now I'm not looking for, like I said, I'm not looking for force. And I really wish we had some way to measure it, like a muscle lab. But muscle lab, they're out of Sweden, I believe, and it's a whole lot of money in order to get that. So you need a linear encoder for both concentric and eccentric. But it's just a thought. And with in the program, the drop squat, we've gotten our RSI up, and then that coincides early in the workout, and we've gotten our sprints faster. So it's a tool. And we also do pogo hops on the bear squat as well. I know DJ loves that because that's what we jump in his arms.
I've checked out. Obviously, we follow each other on social media, and I know that you use quite a lot of testing equipment. Could you just go through some of the testing equipment that you use and sort of why?
Yeah, exactly.
Also, big shout out to Gym Wear. If they ever want to sponsor me, I will take it in a heartbeat.
Hey, I am in that conversation as well. So,
hey, if I get it, I'll send you one.
Yeah, because we have a flex, a Gym Wear flex. So the one where the light bounces and it refracts, but we don't have enough to logistically use it. So we just have one, but. Like you said, so some of the equipment we obviously time our sprints. So we never do a full 20-yard in terms of time. We do flying 10, first 10. So we get our sprints in miles per hour. So that's a metric that we get. We also got Vertec, right? Our volleyball girls love that, especially, they're when they got to create their recruiting profiles. They got to know what their approach jump is, right? We don't do approach jumps every week. We'll do hop over the hurdle. We do a two-step. We'll do mats run invert. So we cycle through it. We also got the plyo mat, and as I said, we could do vertical jumps on it, but you could also measure RSI on it. So reactive strength index, it's how high you jump and how quick you jump, right? So the cool thing about it is it's really easy for the athletes to understand. It's translatable. So after they're done, they get this little box. And it says your RSI number. I'm like, if you're in the threes, that's what I want. If you're in the fours, you shouldn't be here. You should be in the track. You should be in the Olympics. So if you're in the threes, you're good. So you get this little box. Obviously, it's Y graph. You got your inches on one side. You got your time on the bottom. And then you got lower RSI, high RSI, elasticity, and jump height, so the strength. So obviously, wherever you coincide with that, shows what weaknesses you have and what strengths you have. So if you're really elastic, that means your ankle complex is really good. But now I'm gonna have you do a depth jump from box onto it, and then all of a sudden your RSI drops off. That means we got a little bit more strength, right? And then if you're in the red, so strength, right? All right, now let's just have you go off of box again. You're still probably gonna maintain, but now I'm gonna say, okay, jump a little quicker. And if your RSI totally drops off, I'm like, okay, we got to create a little bit more elasticity. And we got to kind of divert the program that way. And we got the shred mill as well. And it gives you a whole acceleration profile as well. It's really nice. And I'm not a spokesperson on the shred mill. Tony is a creator. He does a really good job of doing it. He got some podcasts with Brandon Bird that he goes full salesman mode, and yeah. He'll convince you to get one. But we got that. Let's see. We also got in terms of technology metrics, we got the Ohm run. We that's a phonetic machine, so it sees what wattage you're producing within your run or within the movement too. I've had my baseballs do almost like a Proteus like action where the grab, we have an attachment and they rotate through it. So you can see the watts in that as well. And then obviously you get metrics through weightlifting. Weight is weight. At the end of the day, if you move it, you move it. If you don't, you don't. So that's everywhere, including the ATP.
Yeah, that's something that you said that was quite interesting is you don't test one rep maxes. And I used to think that was the end all be all of testing. But then as I've learned more and sort of gotten these internship opportunities, I've noticed that sometimes the risk to reward ratio isn't enough to test them.
Yeah, we actually do test one rep maxes. But we don't test one rep maxes.
God damn it, Nate.
Yeah.
God damn it.
No, we test 1 rep maxes on our bot squats. We don't do 1 rep maxes for our back squat. That's what I meant. So we don't do 1 rep maxes on our back squat or our back downs. So bot squat, we 1 rep max. Your deadlift, we do triples. We don't do 1 rep maxes. For bench press, you do 1 rep max. And I said it depends on skill level. So not everyone's 1 rep maxing. Some people are doing 3 reps. Some people are doing 5 reps.
Just for some insight as well, I test 1 rep maxes myself because I know my technical ability is there. It's like I would much rather cue trap bar deadlift than a deadlift to a newer athlete. We can develop that deadlift, but we're starting off as a basic trap bar deadlift.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, and then our day twos, the technology doesn't change. The technology is there. It's there. Our day twos, regarding our lifting, we don't max out on our day twos. Technically, you do, but I'll explain that. What we run for our first squat, once again, to the weight room, is brief maximal tension. So typically for brief maximal tension, and this is from Jared Bidney, we're aiming for 0.6 meters per second. So as I said, we don't have enough gym wear or flexes to use logistically. So at the end of the day, that's on our job to program it so they fall within the percentage that they need to be in order to get that velocity. And we do at 75%. So typically, it's found between 70% and 75% of 1 rep max, or 80%, excuse me. But we go at 0.6 or 75%, excuse me. Dude, been talking for too long. My brain's getting fried. But no, I'm going to keep going, though. I just got to catch my tongue a little bit. But
no, that's obviously like testing through everything is key. Because you want to know that your athletes are getting better. Because there's no point in drilling. Yes. Yeah. Because there's no point in testing, sort of like programming squats, like front squats every day, if you don't know why, and you don't know what metrics you're getting out of that.
Yeah. The fellows, they think they're just in to get a workout in. No, you're getting tested every time. But if I say it's a test, then they're like, oh snap, then your cortisol levels rise. Your acetylcholine drops, or it gets dumped, and all this fancy terms, right? But every day is a testing day. Every day is a testing day in terms of that. It just matters what test you're typically running. A barbell back squat, that's a test. Do you get your 1 rep? Could you match that? Could you push past that? If you can, we're on the right track. If not, if you kind of fail at your 90%, then it shows like, okay, what are you doing outside the weight room? Okay, all right, maybe too much volume. Okay, let's see what happens next week. I'm gonna just ask you to reduce that. I trust you that you do. If they're still falling off, I'm like, okay, what weaknesses do we have? All right, what's your back raise at? What's your glute ham raise at? What's your ATP squat at, or your ATP marches at? And they'll tell me, and I'm like, okay, let's try to bump this up, or like the reverse hyper. And then typically, we'll find something like that. But for our day twos, we run brief maximal tension at 0.6 meters per second. So when you reference super training, speed strength is considered 0.6 to 0.9 meters per second. If you reference, I know at UW when we were doing perch, speed strength was 1.0 to 1.3 meters per second. So whatever label or reference you decide to do, just know what velocities you're going at in order to induce the adaptation you're going for. So we do brief maximal tension. We superset that with some regular jumps, so static jumps on the jump mat or plyo mat. And then after that, we do some pause squats, and we do some low box squats. And I talked about the low box earlier on. And we superset that with some pogo jumps on the bear squat and the drop squats as well. And then there are bench press, brief maximal tension as well. Day twos, we do straight bar for the deadlifts, and accessories have a little bit of variation, but it's typically somewhere. Yeah.
No.
Dude,
so
tell me what you've been doing, man. I feel like I'm losing oxygen in my brain right now.
Nah, you're all good. This is the reason why I got you on, is because you can go super detail into metrics and what they mean and why we need to look at them. Yeah. So, I think as well, we can get lost in the data and then we forget to coach. But an interesting point that you brought up was you're there to be someone's someone's something. Like someone's going to look back at these coaching sessions and be like, actually, he had my back there. Let me go speak to him and ask him for his advice on my next move. Because, like, realistically speaking, not everyone's going pro. So what do you do with these kids after they've not made it pro? Like, they still need some basic sort of mentalities and
Yeah.
skills to carry them through life. And I think as an SSC coach, that's something that we go into a lot. And it goes back to that psychology thing that I was talking about. And it's that you need to sort of push beyond just them as an athlete.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, they're
So,
much more than just that.
yeah. So, like, on the back of that, what's some sort of advice that you'd give new SSC coaches or up and coming SSC coaches?
Regarding just coaching,
Coaching in general, taking athletes through. Yeah. Just a piece of advice that you wish that you had been told.
So if you're like me, don't just, there's much more to it than just results. There's much more to SNC than just data and numbers. Because at me, like I'm just like, all right, if these metrics aren't improving, something's going wrong, right? Or like, why are you doing this? Like we talked about earlier, right? So don't get lost in that too much. Really enjoy the journey, and like psychologically wise, you gotta dive deep into that because you can have the best training program out there, but at the end of the day, if someone doesn't want to train with you, someone doesn't want to train with you. Because if that's your coaching style, it's like, oh, mental
Mm-hmm.
toughness, and they don't want to train you because of that, and then that's on you. You wasted your cure. You wasted your potion. So definitely dive onto it psychology wise. I know for me, I read a lot on Brett Bartholomew, and I read this book called Coaching Rush.
I joke, I was literally just about to pull this up.
Conscious coaching. Conscious coaching. It's a great book. But I read Coaching Rules, and it's pretty much an encyclopedia. It's rules. It's like what you should be doing. It's great for new SNC coaches. But one of the rules was, I'm not going to say because one of the words is a bad word, and I don't want you to just take your time to bleep this out. But
you're good. Just go for it.
I'll censor myself. Does the kid need more crap or need more ice cream? And what that means is how do you coach them in that way? Do you need to push them a little bit more? Do you need to be just like bark at them, not be at their neck, but you gotta be on top of them like that? Or do you really need to support them? Do you need to make sure like,
Mm-hmm.
hey man, like how's outside of your yard? I'll say this. As an athlete, as tough as I wanted to act or be, whether if it was a workout or a fight or a training camp, at the end of the day I did need that that the ice cream. I need that ice cream sandwich. I needed that hey man, you're not just an athlete. Because there have been times, especially when I was switching gyms, that not I just start hitting the bag and they're like, man, you done MMA before? I'm like, yeah. They're like, you feel like you get ready for a fight in 2 weeks? I'm like, dude, this guy does not care for my physical well-being. He's just trying to get a paycheck. He's like, man, I'll coach you. Just got to pay me this percentage, all that. I'm like, I appreciate it. I'm gonna keep kicking this bag. So So I definitely, as an athlete, I need more of that ice cream sandwich. But there's definitely some kids that could take it. They could get that crap sandwich. So and you kind of everyone's different. Everyone's different regarding that. So definitely diving into the psychology of coaching helps a lot. Going out of your comfort zone in terms of your biases. As I said, my bias is conjugate. So I do a lot of conjugate training. I listen to a lot of conjugate coaches. There's a million ways to cook a steak. So conjugate is not the only way to do it. I think it's one of the better ways. I think it's the way that works the best within our system, but it is not the only way to cook a steak. So look into what else is out there, what other philosophies there are. Look into if you're ice or ice hockey guy, if you're an ice hockey SNC coach, look at track and field. You're like, what can I get from track and field? Eccentric RFD.
There's a lot of cross bridges between sports as well.
Exactly. So what could you get from that? Because I feel like a lot of people coming into the industry, they're like, I want to specialize in training boxers, right? Well, first, I'm telling you this: it's not Christmas, and you're not going to be able to get that the first time you just step into somewhere, right? Unless you get this amazing opportunity, which maybe, but that is rare. Or like, I want to work with only football players. Truth is, you're gonna have to work with everyone, man. And if you're only working with these people, that just shows how non-didactic you are. You need to be a chameleon in this industry. You need to know how to adapt on the fly, whether if it's a training program or your coaching style. So that's some advice I'll give for people coming into the industry. And also, you gotta learn how to love it, because if you don't love it, you're not gonna last long. You're not gonna last long at all. Because some people they're doing it because they're like, man, I get to tell people what to do. Like, I just get to tell my guys to lift weights and that's it. Well, yeah, let's get it. And then the passion dies down. Then they're gonna find out, oh, I gotta get these internships where I'm not getting paid at all. I just have to talk to them. I have to program. I got to do the dirty work. Truth is, you got to do the dirty work. You can't just shy away from it. If you're being like, oh, I'm being treated unfairly, of course, there are times that, it's possible that you get treated unfairly. But hey, you got to know that this is, a stepping stone or stepping stool where you're necessary to make your dream happen. You can't just, it's not all sunshine and rainbows.
You got to learn to rack and set up a lot of racks before you can coach.
I still do that to this day. I would say out of our coaching staff at Mets SC in the afternoon, I don't do mornings because that's more Gen Pop. Afternoons is where the athletes are. I do want to fill out my mornings though with some athletes. I don't know. There's some things I've been thinking on the back end.
I'll clip this part and you can post it out.
I'll talk to you. I'll talk to you about it. But I definitely want to. What's it called? Anyways, besides that, I think to this day, I still set up the racks before the people come in. Of course, people are gonna ruin the racks. Like there's gonna be an athlete that was like, "Hey, coach, I just got done with my squat. All the racks are full. All right, you got to turn into a bench." And then my OCD goes off, and I get a little mad. But I'm like, whatever, man. You know how to set the rack. But yeah, I still do that to this day. I don't like clutters. There's a professionalism that comes with how you organize things, right? S&C, it's not deemed to be a pretty living. It's not where you get to do like this little fun work and all that stuff. No, it's hard work. It's hard work. It's gonna be messy. But if you could, within a setting of chaos, that you could find some patterns and piece to that, that's the professionalism you got to portray, right? So I hate clutters, all that. I mean, that's just me as a person too. I hate clutters. Not saying I don't get clutters. I mean, don't look at this side of my desk, but
back to your earlier point, I think you'd mentioned that like it's you have to do a lot of the dirty work. And I think a lot of people don't know how much sort of free work you have to do to sort of get into these positions. And I know Coach Mac's big thing is after you've done an internship with him, you're not supposed to do any other ones because essentially you've had all the training possible that you could possibly want to get into your first job. And I think for me that was kind of important to listen to because I'd done like 3-4 years back to back of unpaid work. So I had to have a job to pay for my job. It's just there's a lot of hurdles that you have to go through to get into this industry. And I think being straight up and honest with people from the get-go, like one of my lecturers, I remember he was like, essentially for a while you're a glorified cleaner. You're just tidying up and you're just having to go through movements and just stuff. It is a hard industry to get into.
I mean, that's what it is. If you're not about it, then I totally get it. If you don't like the things that the industry is about, and so I understand if you don't like it, but that's what we do. That's what we do. But yeah, I mean, and then eventually when you kind of climb totem pole, as Ryan would say. Oh man, dude, Ryan has his sayings, man. He's like across the pond, totem pole. I'm like, dude, it's funny. It's good though. I love it. I love it because I catch myself saying that to my kids sometimes, and then I'm like, gosh dang, Ryan. so yeah,
that's the best thing about the internship that we were on. It's like you sort of build connections that are going to last a lifetime. And I think like me and Ryan took me out to his gym, which is Curtis Clay's gym. And like me and him would just like spend the day like just chatting and just like sort of connecting with each other in that level where let's be honest, like our internship was just like yell, scream, shout for 2-3 hours, and then we went out to eat or we went back home, and just like we didn't have that most of the time. We didn't have that time to like really spend it with each other and just like connect on a deep.
The duality of man. So,
in all fairness, when we went to that wing shop, that was one of the best things. Like me, you, and Chu kind of went out to eat quite a lot, but like those were some of my favorite parts.
Yeah, I still go to those places, man. I still go there. But I'm still a big foodie and all that. But yeah. But like I said, it's climbing the totem pole. Once you climb that, eventually, like I said, my where I work, maximum sports conditioning, I was, your eyes. That's what you are first. You're originally eyes. You show that you have the education behind it, because you could have BS next to your name, MS next to your name, but you gotta know how to apply it right there and then. This is a fast moving industry. It's not a slow person industry. If you want to do the slow work, you got to do that when you're at home. So working outside of hours, right? So like me, I do a lot of admin work. I do some programming. I got to set some things up before I even get in. But I love it. I love it. Maybe not the admin stuff in terms of all that, but in terms of I love it. I wouldn't mind doing that in my free time, like let's say early in the morning or late at night. It's something. Obviously, you don't want to spend too much time on it because I still got things to do in my life. But you gotta love what you do, and eventually, once you climb that totem pole, that's when you could put a little bit more of your input. Because then the head guys or the directors, they're gonna trust your input. They're gonna be like, "Oh, what you came from a physical therapy background? What'd you say about this this tendonitis stuff?" You're like, "Oh, I want to throw some isometrics at him because he has quad tendonitis and he should be doing this 45 seconds." 3 sets in order to get a stress relaxation response. So the necrotic part of the tendon could get stressed or could get an adaptation. I want them to do this 3 times a day, 6 hours apart, because that's the refractory period. And they're going to be like, oh, okay, let's try it out. Let's try it out. So it's always about those little moments that you have to step up. And honestly, sometimes it doesn't feel like a big moment. It doesn't feel like, oh my gosh. Whereas some people, it might feel like, oh my gosh, this is a lot of pressure. At the end of the day, if you're well versed, if you're well educated, if you have confidence in yourself and what you do, when that time comes, when you're coming into the industry or climbing the ranks, you'll be ready. And speaking of isometrics too, it's I throw those into my programming. Yeah, we do.
I'm a big fan, especially in pull-up. When people aren't as confident and comfortable doing pull-ups, I love to chuck an eccentric pull-up in there to get them stronger quicker.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, going back to isometrics, we do ankle rockers and everything of that sort. But yeah, that's just another tool in the tool bag. If anyone out there is still listening, 2 hours and 14 minutes in, and you've really gotten past how much of a springy attitude I have, as you would say, man. But yeah, man, what you been up to though, man? I feel like all these podcasts, you've been asking all the good questions. What you been up to, man?
I've been working, really. It's just it's that same again. Like that mentality doesn't change. Like when I was there, I had 6 weeks to like you know who I was, and I feel like that's the kind of mentality I took across there. Is like whatever happened, you were going to remember who I was. And like since like my exam meeting with Coach Mac, he was just like, dude, just whatever you want to do it. I'll support you, and I have been doing that. So I graduated after 4 years, so our degree systems kind of work differently here.
Yeah.
So I got my bachelor's in 3 years, but you get like a bachelor's with honors.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I have. That's why it takes 4 years. And then from there, I was still doing like S&C jobs here and there. I did some internships with, it was like a couple hours a week, which wasn't a lot. I was just like sitting in, listening to physiologists sort of go off. And that to me was really important because I got to learn that side as well. So we used like MOXIE system, so it measures the oxygen in your blood streams to see what happens with fatigue levels. So what happens is like when they started the trial, like they're all like, so we were doing maximal sprints. So for just on the bikes, what's a test called? Maximal sprints. Oh,
It's that
I
research, man.
remember.
Yeah, I'm
I
telling
know
you, it's the
there's so
research that
much.
you. Yeah.
So we're doing like these, I think it was 30 seconds on, 15 seconds off, as like pure high velocity as fast as you could. And then,
Yeah.
so it would obviously peak because you had no oxygen left in there. But the quicker that dip then comes for the oxygen to get back in, the better it is for your athletes because they're able to recover quicker and they're able to output that same sort of levels of
Work,
output the same.
work capacity. Yeah. Yeah.
So depending on how much oxygen you have in your system, the more you can output. And using those MOXIE systems was amazing because I got to see the physiology side of things.
Yeah.
So then I took that into my programs and I was like, okay, he's fatiguing really quick. So his drop, instead of being like this, it's like kind of curve balance. So how can
Mm-hmm.
I help strengthen those weaknesses so that he can better use his like oxygen systems? So
Yeah.
it was quite interesting to know that side, and then it was just like continuing S&C work. I worked in a gym, and it was just S&C I took, which was quite interesting. So I did the barbell lifting club.
Mm-hmm.
So but it was like majority was women, and there was women that weren't necessarily the youngest women. So it was like getting them to move efficiently, like squatting properly. Like most of them didn't know how to squat. So how can I break that down to a point where we're back to the basics? So I
Mm-hmm.
think some of the exercises I even gave them was just like a single, like just a normal box squat. Squat to the box, back up. Squat to the
Yep.
box, back up. Because like the thing for a lot of women is their confidence level that that box isn't going to be there. So even like just me holding out their hands and being like, okay, I'm with you. If you're going to fall, I will catch you. But the chair, thankfully, was always there. Apparently, objects don't move. Um,
Hey, yo, hey, gravity.
but like it's simple. Like so, it was like that was my challenge, and it was I was used to working with athletes, but how can I adapt this to general population? And I
Yeah.
think you kind of need to learn both of this industry. Is like yes, working with athletes is amazing. You get to see the top end of it, but what happens when you strip it back down? Like
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, so like the people who can't move, how do you teach them how to move? How do you cue them how to move? And I think
There
is
we go.
that's where I've learned a lot is just teaching people how to move, and that's why I'm big on movement because like not everyone's squat is going to look the same, not everyone rep is going to look the same. So how can I make the most build intent with that program?
Yeah. There, hey, man, like you hit on the button. You hit on the button, like you said. Um, but yeah, I mean, like you got to learn how to train everyone, right? I know some coaches that have worked with, high level athletes, college level pro athletes, and when they train a youth athlete or high school athlete, still good, right? But their mechanics are off. They don't know what to do because you're so used to training these guys and gals that have these that almost have perfect form that have been doing this for a long time. They're the reason there's a reason why they're at the elite level. All of a sudden, I throw some people that need to get there, and they're like, everything's off. I don't know where to start. Down to the movement patterns, right? Like, and like you said, you're a big fan of movement, and like you said, you've had the gals, they're squatting down to a box, yeah. But even with injuries as well, like I've noticed between my guys and my girls that typically when my guys get injured, it's more of a muscular, injury or something, or not even just injury, like a pain. Whereas for my girls, it's, they still have muscle injuries, and my guys still have connective tissue injuries. But sometimes for my girls, it'll be like more tendon, more joint, more connective tissue. And I was looking into research regarding this, and someone that I really look towards in terms of tendon and connective research is Dr. Keith Barr. And I think this may be the case. It's because estrogen inhibits the enzyme that cross-links collagen. And then even though it's 80% less likely to have a muscle pull for women, there's a 48 times more likelihood of having an ACL rupture. Now you go on the male side, it's the exact opposite. Not obviously from person to person, but if you look at the population as a whole.
So I looked into this for my dissertation, and I've mentioned in previous podcasts, but women. So obviously, women have smaller ACL tendons and all that, ligaments, and that's why they're more likely to rupture it. But at that same term, they're more likely to even damage it further if they're on their period. And that goes back again to the estrogen levels and how their hormones are controlled through their cycle. So on that, it was like, how can you effectively coach these females for the hormonal imbalances that they're going through? To further emphasize that, if so, women already are at higher chance of rupturing their ACL, even further when they're on their period. If they're taking contraceptives, they're even further likely to rupture it, because again, that's just more hormones that are getting pumped in, and not necessarily the good ones. So that's why they'll get like bloated, they'll feel terrible most of the time, their moods will be off, just a whole bunch of symptoms just to control that one thing.
There we go. But regarding that connective tissue injury as well, it's just, I think people look at connective tissue as tendons and joints, right? But the fascia, man, I gotta look so much deeper into this, right? Dan Foley, he has this series called the Fascia Chronicles. It's a course online. And then Sachin, one of the co-owners of Matt's SC, he's told me about it, and we've talked about it, and it's insane. It's insane what how much more out there is than just muscles. Muscles. I lift and all that stuff, right? But the difficulty I have wrapping my mind around it is, first of all, you got guys that don't squat 315 or 225 that jump at the gym, right? Like a John Morant, right? I even think there's a story of Vince Carter. I believe Matt Wenning told this on Mark Bell's podcast, but he couldn't squat 225. Like, he couldn't. But Vince Carter, known as one of the best dunkers of all time, doing some crazy stuff, right? Honey dip in the rim. He's doing all this behind your neck. I don't know, crazy stuff, right? He couldn't squat 225. So there's much more than just, I'm not a fascia-based guy, right? There are fascia-based people out there in terms of programming, and I really want to do some outreach on that. And like I said, get those Fascia Chronicles from Dan Foley, but it has to be looked more deeper into if we want to kind of mitigate injury, right? Because if we looking at it through the lens of force, right? If injuries was a force problem, everyone would train like powerlifters. Now, guess what happens with powerlifters? Their quad tendons rupture. They still get their muscle pulls. They still get their muscle tears. So there's a missing link, right? And then obviously we get that in sports as well. So there's a missing link, and that missing link can be fascia. It's just, I know in order to, I guess, hypertrophy fascia, you have to stress. You gotta create stimulus along the lines of stress. And then depending on what fascia sling is it, whether it's a lateral sling, superficial, posterior sling, whatever that may be. Because fascia, it's high in hyaluronic acid. So it's high in sensory and fluid dynamics, high in, nerve endings as well. So it's a sheath that we're not looking at, or primarily that most people are not looking at. And as I said, I got to dig deeper into it. And that's just because my conjugate bias. So, and then
I was actually going to ask you, when you are sort of doing this myofascial release, how much in depth do you go into METs?
Into what?
Muscle energy technique. So like stretching through movement and all that stuff.
Yeah. I don't go too crazy with it. Just honestly, typically I just test them from the old physical therapy test that I used to use. Let's say for your internal external rotation, your serratus anterior, your latissimus dorsi, just figure out what muscle action the muscle does, and then you test through that range of motion, right? So where it's going to be on a 1 to 3 scale. So 3, you're solid. 2, you're reciprocally inhibited, and then you were fine after we did antagonistic muscle release.
Mm-hmm.
We retrained it pretty much, and then 0 is just a weak muscle, right? So that's pretty much the scale that I look at. So I don't really go through the full range of motion. If I feel like I deem it necessary, then I do. But like I said, typically what I do if I run into an injury or someone like, I have my low back pain also, I use the reverse hyper a lot in the marches. Guess what? That's traction right there. So if someone has like or unilateral pain on their lower back, I'm like, okay, and maybe I talked about this earlier. I have no idea. So I've just been spewing stuff. So I'll have them do.
We are 2.5 hours in.
Man, golly. So I'll have them do a unilateral reverse hyper. So 1 leg at a time, minimum effective dose. I tell them whatever weight's comfortable. Do the other side and end it off bilaterally, right? And then typically their back feels better. They're good to squat. I usually have them avoid box squat after, because you do need to have to break up that eccentric concentric chain. And with that, then becomes lower back compressed, right? Because your lower back has to sit on that box and it may be compressed. And since we just did traction, you're kind of reverting that. So typically I'll just have them back squat or belt squat, and their backs feel way better. But I also do RPR, like I said, reflexive performance reset. That's the first thing I do. Then I test them out through my physical therapy lens from the 1 to 3 scale. And then after that, we'll use like technology. So like I said, reverse hyper, we'll check out your mobility, we'll check out that, and then we'll go from there. Yeah. And I do have PT that I work with as well. So if I'm really dumbfounded, I'm like, hey man, so help me out here. So yeah, and they're great, man. They're great because they got their whole clinic set up. Obviously they got patients coming through, but they're more than willing to help if anytime I have a question, or if a question about myself. I get injuries, so questions about myself or questions about like my athlete. They're like, obviously I'm not a doctor, so I can't say that you're ready to go back to sport, or I'm not a AT, PT, DBT, so I can't say when you go back to sport. So let's consult someone first about it. So they're a really helpful hand regarding that. So yeah.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much for hopping on. Obviously, I love picking your brain because you go really into the nooks and crannies of sort of what is actually happening, and you're diving into that science-based. And I think explaining it properly and letting athletes sort of figure out what they're feeling and how they're feeling and why they're feeling it is an important aspect of our jobs. And I think you do a really good job of sort of really fine picking what it is that's happening and trying to correct it.
Yeah.
And I think as an S&C coach, that is one thing that we are trying to do. We are trying to create this obviously fast, explosive, strong athlete, but in a balanced manner so that they can do their sport effectively.
Yeah, exactly. And some people too is like in the industry, they get their, at least for the US, right? They get their CSCS and they just do their continuing education units, and that's it. That's what it is. And they're doing the bare minimum, but you have to stay educated, not just with what's up to date, not just with to research, because research is going to be behind, you have to keep, if you're not, you have to be a researcher even though I was kind of talking about research in that you have to be a researcher in your own realm of practice, right? You gotta see what works. You gotta be a sports scientist if you're a coach. And if you're not, I wouldn't consider you, honestly, I don't want to bash on anyone, but I wouldn't really consider you like an effective strength and conditioning coach. Because you do gotta know what triggers things. You gotta know what modalities you gotta use. You gotta run experiments every day. When I'm gonna walk in the next like hour or two at my workplace, I'm constantly thinking of something. I'm thinking of like, okay, what if we switch this, or like we do this for their performance, or this injury and that. You gotta run your experiments, and I'm not saying you gotta do a full IRB institutional review board. And trust me, I want to avoid that at all cost. But you have to be as curious as you are willing to be.
Yes.
So
I always put it to my athletes and sort of people that I see is like they're in a 1,000-piece puzzle, and I'm trying to figure out which pieces go where and why they're going there. Like I often a lot talk about like minimal injuries that they've had, but their bodies are so used to overcompensating for that now their left side's jacked. So for me, it's like, how can I break that left side so that I can get back to the original weakness and fix it?
Yeah. I mean, we got it down. I mean, at least, and we were always striving to do a little more, and that's the great thing. It's the endless pursuit of greatness. That's what it is. That's exactly what it is. Greatness in your own mind, you define that as what you want. But if you're on there, you're on there. So there we go.
I'm going to show your Instagram because you do post some really good videos.
Yeah, my car's in there too. That's like from the old Instagram. No, you don't
I'll throw it.
Yeah. But yeah, that's
blur up that number plate.
It's a car, man. I'm not even driving that thing right now. I'm driving this little soccer mom van. So yeah. So I usually for myself, I post me. I don't really post the fellas and guys and gals that I train. That's on our main page, our company page, Maximum Sports Conditioning. So if you do want to check out some training there for our athletes, we do it there. Right there, just avoid the videos.
I highly recommend you.
I hate it, man. Don't do it. I'm not a marketer, I promise. So, yeah. So, and if
for
you
some context, I was giving him crap for that video before the podcast started.
Dude, that's one of my demons right there. I go to sleep thinking about that. But you gotta do what you gotta do. But
exactly, 100%.
Yeah, if there's anyone that ever has any questions, I know I'm not the most experienced or well-versed S&C coach, but if you want to talk about or, pick each other's brains about programming or logistics or physiology, I'm more than happy to talk about it. Like I said, me and Manny beat on this thing for 2.5 hours. I got time. I got time sometimes. So
no, and I think it's a really important skill is like that. Chalking up with people, like going back and just like talking to, because like I'll challenge your views, you challenge my views. I think that's why me, you, and Chu sort of like go on really well, is because like we're all from different backgrounds, we all have different methods and modalities of coaching and training, but we're not dying on that hill. We are able to sort of, okay, you got some good points on this part, let me try it.
Yeah,
and I think
because I know speaking all about that contrast.
Yes.
Yeah.
I asked him about it because obviously that was his big thing, and I love it. Like you're obviously conjugate, and I just like to dabble with everything. But like I think there's a time and a place for everything. So for me, it's more like I'm not going to die on that hill because I may be wrong. Who knows?
Hey man, things change. The thing about the industry is, things come and go. Like that, like the foot stuff. I mean, that happened years ago, and then it's come back. Or like the Vertec, or not the Vertec, excuse me, the Vertimats, the thing that you stand on. That thing, came out, kind of died down and it comes back. Trends come and go. They're going to cycle through again, such as French contrast and everything of that sort as well. It's just, I don't love
actually,
that.
I've got a company I want to show you because I think you'll be very interested.
Dude, I'm already interested.
On what they do. But so essentially they make these different types of machines that, they've got a Nordics one, they've got a jump mat, they've got, it's like this cage where they are able to test isometric movements.
Okay.
I need to find it.
Oh man, I'm always on Facebook Marketplace, like looking at stuff in my area.
Yes.
Yeah, because that's how I didn't do it, but that's how we got the Super Cat or the Bear Squat, and that's how we got the Belt Squat too. So Facebook Marketplace. So that's how we got some SSBs and bamboo bars. So comes in clutch.
I want you to talk about the bamboo bar because I've not officially tried one yet.
Hey, but you know what you gotta do?
Looks brutal,
dude. What's your bench at? This is where the meathead is coming out now.
So because I've got T-Rex arms, I don't actually bench. I just dumbbell. I just go dumbbells, or I've been messing around with bombs up cowbell press.
Yeah. I do that with
for that stability.
Yeah. So what do you typically press for?
I think the most I've ever chucked up was about 100, 110 kilograms. I don't know what that is in.
For your dumbbells?
225. No. Bench.
Oh, okay. I was about to say, man, some dumbbells. Oh my gosh, man.
No, dumbbells. I'll go like 30s, 35s.
Gotcha. Yeah. Hey, man, the professional inside of me, I'm gonna tell that of you, but the relationship we have, the friend side of me, I'm like, load up 2 plates on that bad boy and just send it. But but what I don't really use that with too many of my athletes. Sometimes I use it, and especially if they need some extra work with stability, right, of the shoulder blade. Well, I have them, dude. Yes, I have them bench with it. The bar is about 6 pounds, I believe. So it's not a heavy bar. So if you add 45 on each side, it's going to be 95 pounds. So it's not heavy. But what I actually have them do is hold it isometrically for 30 seconds for each grip and each position. So I have them almost lock out and hold it there, 90 degrees, hold it there, above the chest, hold it there. So that's always a fun one. It's something different that they love to do. But it's also something that I forgot who I got it from, but they use that in powerlifting. I believe Julius Maddox uses it as well. Not maybe to the extent of 30 seconds, but yeah, he holds it for about 30 seconds at each position. I think sometimes they go up to a minute or a minute and a half regarding that. Yeah.
I'll pull up the company. I finally found it.
Oh, Val performance. Yeah, Val.
So I've been getting really into their stuff. Unfortunately, I've not got enough money to splurge on these things.
You're telling me, man. I really want, besides that Kaiser calf, that 1080. The 1080.
Yes. Yeah. They were actually using that at UW this summer. And I got a look at some of their stories and I was like, that is amazing.
That because Rolf, he's actually the creator of 1080.
All right.
Yeah, Rolf, he's the creator of 1080. He's not part of the company anymore because that's his story to tell, right? But if I had that, because a lot of people, they do resistance sprints. We have resistance sprints, right? I would have them do not overspeed, but assisted speed. Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's the baby right there. And it's that thing, you could bring that thing anywhere too, man. That's what I love about it. Yeah.
I've got another one for you, actually.
Dude, this is just becoming a shop.
Yes.
Oh, K-Bots? Yeah, we have a K-Bots.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Legit. We've got one at our university.
Yeah, yeah,
I've messed around with it.
Yeah, because typically with the K-bots, we would do because we got influence from Chris Corfus a lot. Because he actually doesn't use that anymore for his psoas work. We would do psoas work on it along with just squats, right? Because you got, if you ever done it, it's tough. And I
K-box
remember
is brutal.
the first time I did it, they were just like, "Man, just send it." And then I'm like, "So go as hard as I can." They're like, "Yeah." I'm like, "All right." Well, boom, and then I go up. Wait a second, and the world falls on top of me, man. The world falls on top of me. But yeah, we got a K-box, so we use
Were
it all
you
the time.
chest harness or belt?
I was chest harnessed. Yes, I was.
Ooh.
Yes. So
Damn.
I really folded. But yeah,
Oh, for people who are listening who aren't aware of the K-box, so essentially what it is, there's this flywheel. I'll
yeah,
pull it up again. So it's a flywheel, and how it works is you concentrically it's fine, but then it pulls you back down to work eccentrically, and you have to control
yeah.
that eccentric phase to. So have you tried that app?
The what?
Have you done it with that app?
The app?
Yeah.
No, I don't believe so.
So the app, I think I still have it on my phone. So how the app works is it tells you where you're peaking. So if you're peaking concentrically or eccentrically.
Okay.
So essentially what you're going for is a higher peak on the eccentric than concentric, because that means you're controlling your eccentrics better, and you're able to get that sort of adaptation that they're looking for.
Oh, okay.
So the flywheel pulls you down to make sure that you're controlling. So that is attached to a belt, or in Nate's case, a harness. You go up with it, and then it pulls you back down because of the inertia that the flywheel creates. So you're having to control that both sides. So being on a harness is a lot harder than being on a belt, because if you're not used to that controlling system, you're getting folded like a deck chair.
Luckily, they had faith in me, and I'm not an athlete, so I am on the staff. So yeah, but yeah, man, there's so much technology I look into, like even stuff that I don't have, like the 1080 sprint. Because I had to talk to Rolf about it. Is a lot of people use it for resist speed and change of direction as well, and overspeed. The reason why I don't love overspeed, and then Rolf got to talk about it as well, is because when you're sprinting, right, you don't want to cause tenseness, because every contraction has a relaxation. So when you're just tense, there's no relaxation. And then what that usually causes too is there's a limit that he looks for specifically. If there's more than 40 newtons of ground of braking force, then it's too much. It's too much overspeed or too. Yeah. So the reason why, if I had that, I would do assisted speed. Pretty much what that is, it's your average velocity that's achieved in, let's say, for a 100-meter sprinter, 100 meters. So let's say 10 meters per second. They would then move 2 to 3 meters per second over time. So then they would assist to maximum velocity attained. Typically, I believe it's 11.5 to 11.8 meters per second. As the year goes on, as the sprints get higher, the assisted speed gets higher as well. So if someone wants to at 1080 send one over, I will run some attendance. That way. I will gladly do that. I know Rolf, though, since he's not part of 1080 anymore, he's working on something. We've been in contact about it, so I'm kind of
nice.
Who knows? I've been looking at the Quantum 1080 too, or Quantum. That is insane because it has the overspeed super maximal eccentrics. That you get that from Kaiser, but it's more overspeed rather than super maximal. So if you're really a triphasic guy, because triphasic training, so eccentric, isometric, concentric blocks from Cal Dietz. I know typically he does it for time in terms of the eccentrics, but if you got that quantum, you could overload it super maximally, almost like if you had what were those things called, the lifting weight releasers. It's almost as if you had weight releasers, but it's way better. It's tech. So if you're a big E or triphasic guy, that's something that I looked at and I kind of want. But hey, money's money. Money is money.
Money is money.
Yeah.
No, perfect. Thank you so much, Nate, for obviously hopping on and giving us your insight into the industry. And this is why I like this podcast, is like everyone's got such a unique view on strength and conditioning and methods that we use that I'm learning as I go as well. So it's like a school day for me every time. I really like it.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So if you show your Instagram up, everyone can hit you up with questions and queries.
Yeah, so my Instagram is just Nathan_Allas, so NATHAN_ALLAS. That's my Instagram. The strength and conditioning facility that I work at is called Maximum Sports Conditioning. I believe the Instagram is just Maximum. There we go. So it's MAXSC_gym. So if you'll catch some training in there, you might catch me, talking that Manny loves so much about marketing. So just a reminder, I don't have a degree in marketing. So if you catch me, don't catch me lacking.
Again, I'm able to do and give Nate stuff because he does it to me as well, but we are also friends.
If you could take it, we could. If you could take it, you could give it.
Yeah, so don't just give Nate shit.
Please don't. I got high schoolers, man. I got high schoolers and middle schoolers and elementary school kids sometimes, but my college and pros hold it down for me. So.
No, thank you so much, Nate. And we'll catch you later.
Thank you so much for having me on this. I appreciate it. It's
all good. Obviously, the good thing about me running this podcast is I get to have on who I want when I want. So I'm speaking to people who I can look up to and look forward to speaking to. So you're definitely one of those.
Thank you. I very appreciate it. Same to you as well. So I'm telling you, me, you, Chu, and Ryan, same
Ryan
right there. It's gonna be.
I love it.
You might need to upgrade your storage. It might be a 7-hour.
Imagine that. 0 views.
No. I'll watch it.
We'll at least have 4. Me, you, Chu, and Ryan.
I'll send it to my mom too, and my family.
Nice. That's 5.
Yeah.
No, perfect. Thanks so much, Nate.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.